cases do, so that the laws that would prosecute such doctors who prescribe abortion drugs into red states that are anti-choice could not be prosecuted. But the miss was as close as the Supreme Court, which is not exactly a women-friendly kind of place, Marjorie, deciding that there would be a stay at least temporarily. So I guess one of the questions for you at 877-301-8897 is not that much different than it would have been 10 minutes ago. Is this going to cause some of us, we talk about this all the time, including Friday with Ken Casey, is this going to cause the meek amongst us who've been sitting back to realize how close we have come on so many fronts to ruin? I mean, the notion, before this decision...
Sorry.
Yeah, please. Before this decision came down from these three men again, two of them appointed by Trump, nominated by Trump, one nominated by George W. Bush, I would assume that most women who either were living in Massachusetts or who were able to travel to Massachusetts or make a doctor's appointment via telehealth into Massachusetts, felt they were relatively safe. That all disappeared with this ruling, again, protected by a rare Supreme Court action that actually helps women in this country. But do you think it causes people to realize how close to absolute disaster we were?
It's quite scary because you don't know. They state it. This doesn't mean they're going to go along with this down the road.
They ultimately could affirm what was decided by the Louisiana court.
What's scary is we were just saying, if you live, 40% of women that have abortions in the United States are living below the poverty line. And poverty is one of the main reasons people have abortions is because they're poor and they can't afford another child or the first child. So if you can't get these medications in the mail, then you have to drive somewhere to get those medications. And even here in Massachusetts, that would mean a pretty long drive. If you are a woman, doesn't have much money, single mom, you live in Provincetown, that means you're going to drive 2.5 hours to Boston. You're going to find somebody who's got other kids, take care of the kids. You probably have to miss a day of work. Or maybe you got to come stay overnight in a hotel or something. This is a very expensive proposition. And if you live in some place like a Montana, one of these stories was saying this morning, you're going to drive 250 miles. So that's why the mail was such a big deal. The numbers of people getting these so-called medical medicine abortions has gone through the roof. Because if you get them by mail, it does solve the problem of having to travel a very long way. And if they were not going to have access to the second drug, as you said before, the abortion with the I'm always mispronounce it.
Misoprostol.
Misoprostol. Thank you very much. It works, but it's less effective.
There are more side effects.
There are more side effects. You may end up having to go to a clinic to deal with an infection or those kinds of things. And the last thing I want to say is, these drugs are safe and they have very few complications, fewer complications than Viagra, the favorite drug of a lot of men. But at the same time, it's meant that you don't have a choice in this. You might be a person that would rather go to a clinic, have a nurse hold your hand while you're getting an abortion, sit in a nice recovery chair afterwards to make sure you're feeling okay, as opposed to taking a medicine at home, because it can be scary to people. A miscarriage is a scary thing, and you don't have that choice because they've made abortion.
Well, you have
so
the
difficult.
choice to go to the clinic. Until there was a stay, you had to go to a clinic. You had to go to a doctor's office. You had to go to a hospital. You couldn't do it via telehealth.
You couldn't do it via telehealth, but I think for medical procedures,
you call it telehealth. Do you know that?
I don't. What I'm basically trying to say here is, if a man had to have some procedure that was going to cause some level of discomfort, pain, bleeding, and he was a little squishy, he was a little like you, a little squeamish.
I am squeamish.
He might have the option to do it in a doctor's office as opposed to sitting at home doing it in his bathroom.
Can we also speak to the underlying decision? Our number is 877-301-8897, and I fear that almost nobody's going to engage in this discussion because getting back to the meekness of the American population, well, the Supreme Court saved us. It was a horrible decision, maybe as horrible as Dobbs itself. Remember how Dobbs was going to make sure that Trump and the Republicans couldn't be elected to anything? And they control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, despite the Dobbs decision, I should say. It was not exactly the uprising that we forecast as a result of that. And here, my fear is This is, as I say, a near miss, thanks to the Supreme Court, at least temporarily. So my guess is going to be no harm, no foul kind of thing. But can we go back to the court decision? How often does a federal court overrule the FDA? Almost never. The FDA authorized the use of this drug in 2026 years ago. As you said, it's one of the safest drugs of them all. Yet this court decided, this federal court in Louisiana, the three guys decided that they knew more about this
I know.
than the
I always love
FDA
it
did. Our number is
when it's
877-301-8970.
men
Well, it's not
making
just
these
men.
decisions.
It's not just men in this case. It's also the courts in general. Even if women had made this decision, which I'd consider to be unlikely, again, they almost always defer to the experts. In this case, despite Kennedy's position, the FDA or the experts. There's one other thing, by the way, one other consequence of this, there's a political issue here too, in light of what I just said about how it didn't have the impact most people whom I know thought it would have, the Dobbs decision has. This is going to be a big issue in the race for governor, assuming the guy who overwhelmingly won the party nomination, he still has a primary, Mike Minogue, at the Republican convention. His line is, I'm a Catholic and pro-life. Obviously, there's nobody who's more pro-choice than the incumbent who's running for re-election. Again, there's a second Republican candidate who is in a primary, but that's a pretty central issue, don't you think?
Well, and we'll have to question him when he does get in. I'm always, I find it an odd term for people that are anti-abortion to call themselves pro-life when they veto every single program that could help the life once it's born to afford food and housing.
Well, I think we should let him, he's been invited by, I think we should let him explain what his position is.
Yeah, we'll absolutely ask him. But generally speaking, that has been the Republican position. The great Barney Frank line, by the way, Barney Frank was interviewed on television
I know,
from
that's
hospice
incredible.
care.
By Jake Tapper, right?
Tapper, yeah. The great Barney Frank line is to be pro-life. What is it? You're opposed to, your abortion is only up till you're born. You're pro-life until they're born, and then it's all over. I'm botching this line.
You're botching it.
You're supposed to rescue me here. What's the line?
I don't remember. 877-301-8970. Mary in Rhode Island, you're first on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. I'm a physician down in Massachusetts in Rhode Island, and I started working this last week as this started happening. I don't currently provide these services, but I feel like everybody needs to, because this is what it comes down to for everybody that's listening that is cheering on that we're restricting women's rights. It comes down to patient autonomy, and that is the right over your body to do what you want. And so I would pose to people that are in support of restricting abortion, if there was a medical procedure that was safe that you wanted done and somebody else came in, not your physician, a political figure, someone else, and said, no, you cannot, think about it in that way. And if you're okay with that, then continue to be pro-life. But it's patient autonomy, and we should each have that for our own bodies, period.
Before I ask you a question, by the way, the Barney Frank quote is, life begins at conception, ends at birth.
Yeah,
Mary, what do you think, before this stay was issued by the Supreme Court earlier this morning, or much earlier, but a couple of minutes ago this morning, what do you think the consequence, the real-world consequence of the Louisiana appellate court decision would be on the ground, in real life in Rhode Island?
I think it's going to divide us further. I think it's going to make the political arguments that seem to be coming in faster and harder just even worse. And now we already lost the Dobbs, or we already had the Dobbs decision, and it's really just even more gasoline, I would say, on the fire that is already burning. And I worry that it's going to tear us further apart instead of have thoughtful conversations with people we disagree with and find commonalities to bring us together.
Before you go, Mary, this administration seems to be all about taking medical decisions away from individuals and away from parents. I mean, we have these fights up here in Boston where puberty blockers for kids who are teenagers, the government, they think that they should make those decisions, not the mother, not the father, not the teenager, and not the hospital. They think that the politicians, corrupt politicians, a lot of them, should make the decision. That's sort of their stance in general. You know.
I think we lost Mary.
guess
Mary,
Mary's
thank you
gone.
much for the call. We appreciate it, and thanks for your work. 877-301-8970.
This is from Lucy. This was a painful weekend for me. I mentioned in an online discussion that I personally had a spontaneous abortion as well as a medical one to save my life. So many MAGA types came at me. A spontaneous abortion is in fact the medical term for a miscarriage, but those zealots thought I made the decision, and because she talked about abortion, she was like, I guess, totally trashed online. 877-301-8970. Melissa from Cambridge, you are next. Thanks for calling.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my call.
Hey, Melissa.
I'm calling because, hi, Jim.
Hey.
Last week I moderated a panel, including the governor, at the Repro Party for Planned Parenthood of Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fundraiser for their advocacy fund. And in preparing to be a moderator, I mean, it's like being a journalist, which I've been much of my life. You have to know so much before you go into that in order to carry on a conversation with people who know a lot. So I started reading a Substack called Abortion Every Day by Jessica Valenti, who was one of the panelists. And I don't think that people really realize the extent. We live in a bubble here in Massachusetts, and I don't think people really realize the extent to which these actions taken against women, against their bodily autonomy, as the doctor said, are happening. Let me just give two quick examples that Jessica spoke to in her. One, in Florida, 2 pregnant Black women were forced into what was called in Florida Zoom court while they were in active labor, as lawyers and judges overrode their medical consent and mandated that the women undergo unwanted C-sections. Okay,
Wow.
That's in Florida.
Why?
In
Why?
Tennessee, because they insist that the baby must be born and they don't want to take any chance at the baby not being born. And
Oh, my
so they're
God.
literally taking these women in labor. I mean, this is why we have to understand what's happening beyond the headlines that we see in sort of the mainstream media in the red states. In Tennessee, literally 6 women were prepared to testify about their incredibly harrowing experiences due to that state's abortion ban. Their lawsuit was filed in 2023, which was challenging the state's ban. It was 2 days away from being heard in court, and the Attorney General of Tennessee managed to stop the case from being heard in court. So these women's, literally their voice was also taken away, right? Not their bodily autonomy, their voice to even tell this story in a court of law and seek justice. So, I mean, I think when we're talking about this, it's good that the stay is made, but anyone who wants to educate themselves, just check into Jessica Valenti's Abortion Every Day, literally reporting
she's great.
from what's happening around this country that we're not hearing here in Massachusetts. So,
Well, again, that's huge, Melissa. We're really glad you called as always. But keep in mind that until this stay, we didn't have to go to Florida to see an impact of this. There was an impact right here. And again, as I said, the bluest and arguably one of the most pro-choice, if not the most pro-choice states. Hopefully that'll wake people up. I don't know. Melissa, thanks for the call. Really appreciate it.
Well, what is happening as well in a lot of red states that someone may have a miscarriage late in a pregnancy, or they're hemorrhaging and they go to the hospital, and it's like they're on trial. Was this a miscarriage or was this an abortion? You know, and have to defend themselves, and it really is none of their business. But that's what it's come to in a lot of states, where people are afraid of getting hospital care because they're afraid of being accused of a crime, which is a crime in some of these states, incredibly enough. Is it Rodrigo?
It is.
Hi, Rodrigo
In DC.
from Washington. Thank you for calling.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
No, I just was calling because I was struck by something that Jim said about how he was surprised or shocked by the fact that the courts had kind of overturned the FDA. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that reminded me that basically 2 years ago, the Supreme Court struck down the Chevron deference doctrine, which didn't receive, in my opinion, nearly as much news coverage as it should have.
We talked about it, but explain.
Yeah, which was a 40-year-old doctrine that said that the courts should defer to executive agencies because they were the experts. But now the new legal norm is that the courts can pretend to be experts over things they have no idea about. And so we're going to see the impact of that in healthcare, in the environment, and in a bunch of other regulations that will have nationwide impacts. And these decisions are being made by people who are not experts in their field.
That's exactly correct. That is exact. I'm really glad you added that to the conversation, Rodrigo. Thanks for your call. We really appreciate it.
Here's
By
a
the way,
text.
can I just add something to this
What?
discussion? So that we're not sitting back feeling safe and protected. This is a one-sentence order by the Supreme Court. The stay is in effect for a week until May 11th, 1 week. And Alito, who issued the order, and I think we can probably guess how he'd vote eventually, requested the parties file brief by this Thursday, and then the full court will determine how to proceed. So this is, as of the moment, a week's respite from this rather amazing decision, well, maybe not so amazing decision out of Louisiana.
Here's a texter. Merely living in a blue state isn't enough to protect us from these fascists anymore. The sooner we realize this, the better we can fight back.
Well, that really matters. And I thought it was really valuable the other day that Governor Healy, when she was with us, said for probably the 20th time with us that the Medicaid cuts, which obviously are as dramatic in places like ours as they are anywhere, they're huge, huge impacts of Trump that even the most anti-Trump of legislators and executive officers can't fend off. And this is yet another example. Even though we want to be clear, even though if this stay was repealed, when we spoke to the Attorney General's office this morning, they are going to be part of this litigation, number one. Number two, as you said, which I was not aware of, I'm embarrassed to say, the second drug can be taken more than once in lieu of mifepristone. It just as you said, it's not as effective, and there are side effects.
Right. This is not a day at the beach.
No, it is not.
And I think that's one of the things kind of, this will be fine. Well, if you're going to have a medical abortion, you'd rather have it the safest, least painful, and least scary way possible.
We agreed, and I think most of our listeners from the communications we read over the weekend agreed that Friday's show was about as much fun and as great as
this
we've
one
had.
is not so much
and
fun.
No, that's not my point at all.
Okay.
Thank you for disparaging our work. The point I was trying to make is I love Ken Casey said on a couple of occasions he was in Greece when there was like a mass strike because they changed the day of trash pickup in a particular community. Were there mass demonstrations over the weekend in response to this? By the way, we have made clear, maybe we have made clear indirectly, the Louisiana decision was a nationwide decision, obviously by definition, based on what we've said. This Louisiana appellate court essentially outlawed telehealth for medical abortions.
That's correct.
And what was our response over the weekend?
Nothing.
I mean, we're sure there are people listening who did a little neighborhood standout or whatever. Absolutely nothing. Is that more significant than changing the day of trash pickup?
Well,
close.
People felt bad for the Celtics.
Martha in Worcester.
We should point out one thing, too.
Hold on,
is
Martha,
that
one
these
second.
medical abortions, mifepristone and stuff, this is early in pregnancy. Some people don't realize they're pregnant for quite a long time. So if you're up to like 13, 14, 15 weeks, you have to go in nearly all cases to physically get a surgical abortion, and there are very few places, or far fewer places, where you can get them.
Martha,
now.
you have a minute. You're in Worcester. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, I'm Martha. I'm a proud mom. I had my daughter, and not too long after, I got pregnant again. Pregnancy is miserable, and the first few years of raising a child are the hardest thing I've ever done, even though they're beautiful. I firmly believe that I have a right to my body autonomy. I chose to have a medical abortion by taking the pills. I was one of those moms that didn't realize I was pregnant for quite a while. And without having access to the pills quickly, that would have forced me to go ahead and have a surgical abortion. And I just think this is a basic right that people should have. Moms like myself already have a child, and we know how hard it is to raise one. People should not be forced to have a child that they don't think they can support.
Martha,
thank you much
thank
for
you
your
very
call.
much
We really
for that
appreciate
call.
it.
Yeah, that was a great one. Thanks everybody else who called or texted too. Coming up after this quick break, we're going to talk with Margaret Sullivan, columnist for The Guardian. She joins us to talk about press freedoms at risk here in the United States and all around the world. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
When federal agents first investigated New Bedford's fishing mogul, the Codfather, he unveiled his special system for painting fish, the key to understanding his entire scheme. I'm Ian Koss. Hear how he pulled it off on Catching the Codfather, Part 5, Painting Fish. Tonight at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bernadine Sung Megason at Dreamega International Realty, dedicated to helping buyers and sellers across Greater Boston, offering market insight and guidance through each step of the process. More at homesbybernadine.com.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping customers achieve their vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding them from design to completion. With showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Margaret Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday and Friday. The Attorney General will join us for an hour next Tuesday. Margaret and I both thought of Margaret Sullivan, of course, Margaret Sullivan of Media, Politics, and Culture, columnist for The Guardian U.S., author of the American Crisis Substack, available at margaretsullivan.substack.com. We both thought of Margaret this weekend when each of us heard a clip from Rachel Cohen. Rachel's a young lawyer who publicly resigned from her high-profile Skadden-Arps job in protest of their capitulation to Trump. Here's Cohen talking about how the New York Times headlined their coverage of the Supreme Court's voting rights ruling.
Anyway, here's how the New York Times decided to headline their coverage about the Supreme Court getting rid of the Voting Rights Act so that Republicans can now draw maps that look like they did during Jim Crow. The Supreme Court shakes up America's political maps. Hannibal Lecter shakes up forensic psychology. Harvey Weinstein shakes up Hollywood casting practices. Tonya Harding's boyfriend shakes up Olympic ice skating competition. You.
Well, I'm not sure Margaret would put it exactly that way. Joining us now is Margaret Sullivan. Good to talk to you. Thanks for calling in.
Again, it's always so much fun to talk to you, even if the things we're talking about are not that much fun.
That is correct.
Well, Rachel has a point. That's one of she's like singing your song.
She has a great point.
Yeah.
She has a great point. I mean, it's this business of constantly, kind of downplaying and normalizing. And, some people, like me, use the word sane washing.
Yes.
Like you take something that's so outrageous and you kind of take the edge off it so it sounds not so bad. I mean, this thing that happened with the Supreme Court and voting is just off the charts bad. It's like the worst thing for voting rights since the Dred Scott decision. I mean, and so just to say, it shakes up the political map is pretty bad.
So, Margaret Sullivan, we know you're not a fan of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Did you ever go? Did you go earlier in your career?
I've been invited to go by various institutions along the way, but I've always felt that it wasn't something for me. I have gone to an even fancier Washington dinner once called the Gridiron Dinner, which is white tie, which is the fanciest you can get. And so I think I got a feel for what it was like to, be around everyone in government and everyone in journalism all schmoozing and sort of clinking champagne glasses. I guess I just don't think that's a great position for the press to be in.
So in a second, we're going to ask you to explain what you think should happen going forward, as you wrote about. But first, here's Trump at a press conference immediately after the shooting at the Correspondents' Dinner, and it's followed by a bit from his 60 Minutes interview, also shortly after, with Norah O'Donnell.
We're going to reschedule. We're going to do it again. You shouldn't be reading that on 60 Minutes. You're a disgrace.
Okay, he wants to go to the dinner honoring the First Amendment, make sure it's rescheduled, and Norah O'Donnell is a disgrace for reading from the actual manuscript of the shooter.
Exactly.
What do you think should happen going forward, Margaret Sullivan?
Well, I've felt for some time that dinner, it should really be completely rethought. And that people, just as a starting point, people who have shown themselves to be enemies of the independent free press, which is so basic to our democracy, people who have shown themselves to be trying to undermine it, should not be invited to come and, celebrate the First Amendment. I just think, the Pete Hegseths and the Donald Trumps and the Stephen Millers of the world, they don't deserve to be there. So, I would start there. But I also think that just to rethink the idea of schmoozing with, for journalists to be schmoozing with the people they're supposedly holding accountable on the part of the public is just not a good idea.
You know something, I don't know, because I was a reporter once and started a long time ago, but it was you weren't supposed to be socializing at all with politicians. If you went out for lunch with a politician, you were supposed to pay, no gifts. Yep. Sometimes I remember somebody sent me flowers once. My boss made me send them back. Has it changed that much? I think it has.
Well, some people still hew to those standards, and I admire them for doing so. I always think about this photographer, now deceased, for the New York Times, Bill Cunningham.
Oh,
who,
yes, the fashion guy.
Great fashion.
Yes.
Great fashion photographer, and you might think of him as like tooling around New York on his bicycle.
Yeah.
But he would go to these big fancy events, and he wouldn't even take a glass of water because he didn't want to be obligated. He didn't want to feel like he was obligated. And I don't think I personally go that far. I would, I would take a glass of water and maybe a little more than that. But I think to have some sort of standard of we're not going to, we're basically going to maintain some critical distance so that when it comes time for us to criticize or report on something that's tough, we can do it. And we can do it with a good spirit and a good conscience.
Because if you're friendly with someone, you're much less likely to do that, human nature being what it is.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it also
Exactly right.
creates an impression.
You
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It also creates an impression in a cynical public anyway about how everybody's in bed with each other, all the high-profile types.
That's right. And, we're at a time of very low trust in the media, low trust in journalism. So why would we go out of our way to make it worse, which I think this does. And, I guess people really like to get dressed up and that's fine. I'm not a killjoy, but I just think that you can celebrate the First Amendment. You can have a big party for something serious. I make the comparison to this other event that I do go to, which is the annual Committee to Protect Journalists dinner. And, the people who are speaking at it are the journalists around the world who've been locked up or punished or, you're not hearing from people who are the people doing the abuse or the imprisoning. So I think it's possible to raise a lot of money for a good journalistic cause without selling out.
So before we leave this, if whatever condition you described a minute ago, Margaret Sullivan, that should be applied to guests like presidents, for example, is there any president you can think of who would pass that litmus test and be invited? I mean, I remember in our studio a decade or so ago, we had James Risen in here from the New York Times, who was being subpoenaed by Barack Obama. And I think the line from Risen was something like Obama was the greatest enemy of press freedom, either in his lifetime or something. So would anybody get invited who was president?
That's a great question. I agree with Jim Risen, and I've written columns about that Obama, very unfortunately used the Espionage Act
Yeah.
to go after sources and to go after indirectly and sometimes directly to go after journalists. So it's hard to, I think that's at the basis of this whole thing. There's an adversarial or almost frequently adversarial relationship. So, the idea here is, well, this is the one night of the year that we lay down arms and we are civil to each other. But, that's not really what's happening here.
Yeah, I remember. Didn't Obama banish Fox News from some press availability?
It was a press gaggle.
Yeah.
And interestingly, even though Fox is Fox, the other reporters and journalists stood up for Fox and said, no, you're not going to do that. So, there's a long history of this kind of thing. And I think that trying to get together and be really, super friendly is just not a great idea. And then, of course, we saw what happened just at this most recent one. It's a great reason to say, we're going to rethink this whole thing. But instead, I think what we're going to see is rescheduled event that'll be very similar to the initial one. And, that clip you played of and
Rachel
spoke about of Donald Trump saying we're going to reschedule it. It's not his event, he's not doing the rescheduling. And when he talks about how this really proves we need the ballroom, I mean it's not in the ballroom. It's not in the White House. It's not a White House event. So a lot of that is just some crazy stuff.
One last thing about this. I'm thinking back to ancient history when JFK was president and Ben Bradley Sr. was head of the Washington Post. He wrote a memoir, much of which was about his cozy relationship with JFK, which makes me wonder the role of the great Ben Bradley, who, of course, was the Watergate journalist, but also might have been a little bit too cozy with him in terms of what he was doing with women.
I think he was.
Yeah.
I think that Ben Bradley was very friendly. You see pictures of Bradley and I guess Sally Quinn, his wife, and the Kennedys, on a sailing, a yacht or something.
Yes.
And you wonder, well, gee, is that really holding power to account? So there's a lot of blame to go around.
So Jimmy Kimmel, we have played the joke that he told before the dinner about 3,000 times on the radio. I assume most of our listeners and viewers know what Melania and Donald Trump want done to him. So far, ABC Disney is standing strong, unlike they did in the Stephanopoulos case when they wrote a check, I think, for $16 million. Are they standing strong because they grew a spine or because they learned a lesson from the Stephanopoulos case, do you think?
Well, I think what they might have learned a lesson about is the first time they pulled Jimmy Kimmel off the air, I guess it was last September, similar kind of thing. He said something and Trump didn't like it and people protested. And so then there was bipartisan criticism of ABC for pulling him off the air, and lots of people canceled their Disney Plus subscriptions and their Hulu subscriptions. I think that's the lesson that they learned.
Right.
Not so much, one about press freedom or freedom of speech. It's not really press freedom.
What were we going to say? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to move on to the Catholic thing. So apparently, Margaret, so I did not know this about you. K through 12 Catholic school, Georgetown University Catholic school.
Yes.
Yes. Nonetheless, you are a lapsed Catholic and a half-assed Buddhist, as you describe yourself. But
well, I think I have been that. But I think I'm coming back around to being a practicing Catholic, and I'm trying to be. I'm getting to Mass every week, and I'm giving it the old college try. And my college was Georgetown, so I'm giving it that try. And it's very meaningful to me because I was brought up as a Catholic and schooled that way. And my dad was what I was called a daily communicant.
Yeah.
He was a lawyer, and he went to Mass every morning before he went to his law office. So. I do criticize the Catholic Church and have my issues with it, but it's also I'm very steeped in it.
You wrote this piece, though. I thought what was great about your Return of the Church piece was this happened before, I checked the dates, before this proud, bold statement on press freedom from the Pope over the last couple of days, where he's
That's right.
lamenting the assaults on the press, obviously the killings, in ways that leaders closer to home are not doing. So that makes it even more inviting, does it not?
Well, I do. I admire Pope Leo. I don't agree with everything he says, certainly, and it would be tough to agree with everything a Catholic Pope says, but I think that he is right about a lot of things. I think he's right about trying to strive for peace, about social justice. He's right on treating immigrants fairly and humanely. So, he's someone who, in general, I admire him, and I admired Pope Francis before him too. So, again, it's not like I'm signed up for every single thing they say. I'm not. But I think that they are overall representing something really important, especially in this moment in our history.
Margaret Sullivan, we only have a couple of minutes left. And by the way, you should subscribe, margaretsullivan.substack.com. If the Democrats take over the House again in January, win the elections in November and take over in January and begin to hold hearings as they promised to do, what should they be doing on issues that are closest to your heart? What should they be doing?
Well, I'd really love to see more people in the public sphere talking about press freedom and showing that they care about the role of journalism. By the way, this is the day that the Pulitzers are awarded, so you're going to see a lot of great journalism being celebrated, and it's true, it is great. But I'd like to see people actually articulate that, the role of local news, the importance of a free press in a democracy. Obviously there are policy things too, but also just talking the talk would be most welcome. You don't really hear a lot of it.
By the way, I wasn't aware of that. It's 3:00 today by live stream. The Pulitzer Prizes will be awarded by the Pulitzer Prize Board.
Okay, we only have about 40 seconds left, but I thought this story about teenagers getting most of their news from social media and influencers was upsetting until I read that a lot of those teens are skeptical of what they do get on social media from influencers. So glass half full kind of deal?
Let's hope so. I think we need young people to be well informed and to vote, and I'm hopeful.
Margaret Sullivan?
We've never had a half-assed Buddhist on the show before. It was a thrill to have you today, Margaret. It really was great.
I'm glad I could fulfill that role.
You did.
Yeah. There's a lot of overlap. I know a lot of people who are Catholics and got the Buddhism thing going on the side too, or
it must be the yoga.
Yeah, it must be the yoga. That's right.
Margaret, thanks as always. We really appreciate your time.
You bet.
Thank you very much for joining us. We've been speaking with media, politics, and culture columnist for The Guardian at U.S. and author of the American...
Guardian U.S.
Yeah, Guardian U.S. I stumbled over that. And author of the American Crisis Substack, available at margaretsullivan.substack.com. It's a great Substack. Coming up after this quick break, the NAACP's Michael Curry is going to talk about the Voting Rights Act and a bunch of other healthcare issues. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR, GBH, NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Tune into The Culture Show for daily discourse on the arts and culture scene, and join us for what is a continuous conversation about the state of the arts with the most interesting thinkers, innovators, and creators in the region and beyond. From the poets to the painters to the power brokers who hold the purse strings. It's all here on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Moonbox Productions, presenting the 5th annual Boston New Works Festival. 7 original plays from local playwrights on 3 different stages at Arrow Street Arts, May 7th through May 10th. Ticket info at moonboxproductions.org.
and the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, and former U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns. BostonSpeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder is streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday and Friday. The Attorney General is with us on the 12th, which is a week from tomorrow, at the library for an hour of Ask the AG. Joined on Zoom by Michael Chéry. Michael is the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. Hello, Michael.
Good morning.
And to you.
Good morning, Michael. Well, let's start with the Voting Rights Act. Last week, Wednesday, the Supreme Court again weakened the Voting Rights Act. Some would say decimated the Voting Rights Act. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we knew after Shelby v. Holder that the attack was on to undermine what we celebrated just over 60 years ago with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that we wanted to open up the franchise and eliminate the discriminatory practices that barred Black and brown folks from participating in our process and seeing the results of their participation, which means greater representation. People were using the gerrymandering, as we say in these terms, packing and stacking. You either pack people into districts that were created so that they only get one vote, or you crack them so that they can't have a critical mass of voters to participate. And as a result, we've seen greater participation, not where we need it to be, but greater participation through the protections of the Voting Rights Act and the pre-clearance in Section 2 of the Voting Rights Law. We are now, that law has been under attack for several years, and this most recent Supreme Court decision is the next iteration of that. It is gutting the Voting Rights Act in a way that it will not protect us going forward.
I think most people who've read follow-up for this over the last few days understand, well, I don't know if they understand. They have some understanding of the impact of this on the congressional level, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think it's important that people understand this reaches down onto every level of elective office, including municipal elections, including in places like Massachusetts. The consequence may not be in Massachusetts what it might be in Louisiana, but I am correct, am I not, that it reaches down to every level of democratic, small d democratic elections, yes?
Yeah, it seems that the court seems to imply, and I think many of us are still trying to distill to make sense of what this ruling is, and I've been reading the actual decision over the last week. What it appears to me is, one is it will create a barrier for states, even Massachusetts, over time, to create maps that are intended to engage more voters in the process and make sure that people can see greater representation. So I worked on redistricting here with former leaders Rosenberg and Mike Moran when we did redistricting many years ago, and we presented maps that created the district that is now Ayanna Pressley's 7th congressional district. We had, Massachusetts Vote, NAACP, and many other organizations were part of reimagining Massachusetts's mapping so that there would be greater representation. We now have a congresswoman serving in that seat on every level. To your point, Jim, now when you've been intentional to create maps for greater representation, that's at risk with this ruling.
Also the incredible, well, actually nothing is incredible anymore. Stop using that word, Jim. Move on. A bunch of particularly southern states have reacted immediately. Governor Kemp, to his credit, unless I hope I got this right, in Georgia, has said we're not going to change the districts for this election. We'll focus on implementing the Supreme Court decision in 2028. In Louisiana, this is incredible. People have already submitted mail ballots, including troops overseas. And if they have their way, those votes are all going to be canceled out and it will start again, which realistically means in many of those cases, those voters are going to be totally disenfranchised. I mean, you ever heard anything like this? A cancellation of votes that have been cast? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean the disrespect for voters is clear here. This is not about making sure all voters their ballots can be counted, their voices can be heard. And I've used this analogy before. This is chess, and demography is destiny. And folks are feeling like whether it's Republicans or those who are feeling like they're at risk of losing their seats in some of these states like Texas and others, and Louisiana. They're trying to play chess, and they're using this most recent Supreme Court decision as the impetus to abruptly change their election laws to see if they can change the outcome of this midterm election. This is chess. This is not about voters. This is not about our democracy. This is about winning and not losing.
You know, I hate to be Johnny One Note, and everybody's going to say, well, then don't be, but I will be. The theme that I return to with almost every atrocity, we started with the Mifepristone decision, which we'll get to in a minute, with you, which obviously was stayed by the Supreme Court at least for a week this morning. My one note-ism is how tepid the reaction is to whether it's changing abortion as dramatically, I would argue, in some cases, as Dobbs did several years ago. This gutting of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that the white guys who are running the show continue in power as long as possible. Is it fair to say that the reaction to this was almost, I don't know, from the bulk of the population, fairly casual, or am I being unfair?
No, I think it's a broader issue than that, Jim, which is I think the shock and awe of this administration and this Supreme Court, right? Is at some point you're just barraged with so many disturbing Supreme Court decisions and executive orders and policies. But I know that the National NAACP president put out a statement that I quote, "This will likely go down alongside Dred Scott as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in our nation's history." The ruling essentially gives politicians a green light to silence entire communities. Quote, "Our democracy is crying for help. This moment is serious, hard-won protections we fought for, bled for, and died for under a direct attack." I think, from the voices we expect, the NAACP, the Legal Defense Fund, the Urban League, and many other voter protection agencies, the cry has gone out. I just think people like you and I and others are just overwhelmed by democracy failing. And I know that sounds hyperbole or dramatic, but it's real. It's failing us right now. And unfortunately, this is some of much more to come.
One last thing about this, in the, as Alito, he wrote the decision, as Jim said, that a plaintiff who wants to challenge this new law must show proof that maps had, quote, intentionally, that map makers, rather, had intentionally drawn legislative districts to disadvantage a given racial group. And as Kagan and others who dissented said, how do you prove that someone intentionally did it, what was in their head? That was their motive. I mean, that's really
it's a very important
difficult.
Point,
so it makes it extremely hard to see how this goes away, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, there was a time where, people were blatant and overt with their racism, and they put it in writing, and they say it in their speeches, the Bull Connor days. And folks wisened up and decided, hey, if we want to actually win, then we can't say it. We gotta mask it. We gotta put it in policy that doesn't say race. So, again, it's chess, not checkers. And what this Supreme Court decision is, it makes it much harder for many of us who want to challenge these discriminatory practices and policies from actually proving it, because you need a smoking gun.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find a smoking gun when people are hiding it.
So to sum up here, what the Supreme Court has said is, one, that partisan gerrymandering, even of the most extreme nature, is perfectly constitutional. That's number one. And number two, racial gerrymandering is perfectly acceptable too, unless you can prove, which is virtually impossible, that it was intentional.
Yeah.
That's the state of the districting law in the United States of America as of the date of this most recent voting rights decision. We're talking about...
Yeah, I would argue the Republican Party, which has weaponized and and used the nuclear option, as we see play out under this administration, that they are breaking all kind of things, the bull in the china shop, which is our democracy. And the reality is they've decided that that window of opportunity to do that is going to be open very short period of time. And I say 4 years is a short period of time. And they are going to try to get as much as they can done. And that includes our Supreme Court. Those decisions are disturbing coming from our nation's highest court. And as the dissenters in this case so artfully expressed, we should all be concerned.
Well, I respectfully disagree, and I think you'll agree with my disagreement if it's not too confusing here, is a short period of time to do legislative things that advance their agenda. A ton of time. The three people that Donald Trump nominated to the Supreme Court are relatively young, all are in their late 40s or 50s. There is a move afoot to get both Alito and Thomas, who I think are the two oldest justices, to step down now, so that if the Senate goes Democratic as of January, Trump knows he couldn't confirm his kind of nominees, and Trump would nominate young Alitos, young Thomases, and this Supreme Court could be in the hands, regardless of who's elected president, of Trumpian kinds of characters for decade after decade after decade.
Totally agree.
Well, I'm hopeful that they get so many nice gifts and trips and cruises and so forth and free jet that they won't do it. You know, they're going to drag them out of there.
What are you talking about? They can take all those gifts and stay there.
They can do it.
That,
Clarence
right?
Thomas is
Exactly.
on a yacht right now, I bet.
He's on a yacht right now.
Yeah, but he may not be on so many yachts if he's not in the Supreme Court anymore.
Do you know
That's what
that
I'm
Thomas gave a speech last week in which, what's the guy's name? Harlan Crow, the yacht guy?
Oh, he gave him
in
a
which
big
he praises
shout-out.
the guy,
I
and
know.
there's not even an attempt to cover over this back-dealing, grifting kind of thing.
Can't even make it up.
Can't make it up. We're talking to Michael Chéry.
So, Michael Chéry, right before he went on the air, the Supreme Court did stay this decision affecting mifepristone, which is a medical abortion drug. You don't do community health centers don't do abortions, I don't think, but I wonder what the impact, because there is a big, what the impact might be on health of women in general. One of the major reasons people get abortions is because they can't afford children. Poverty is a big factor. So what is, do you think the impact? It's only been stayed for a week.
Well, one is, here we go again with Louisiana. As we seem to be a theme with Louisiana these days. And then suing the FDA, as these states are now putting abortion bans in place, and they see the mifepristone opportunity or access to the drug as being a workaround for those who want to get abortions. So they're challenging it in the courts. We know that mifepristone works, that it actually helps those, and particularly those under a certain number of weeks in their pregnancy. We know that in Massachusetts, providers are able, through shield laws, to prescribe those and to be protected even if out-of-state folks access the drugs. Or the drug. And now this is playing out in the court. It puts the Trump administration in a precarious situation in that it's their FDA that's being sued. And it's Trump supporters who, many of whom are anti-abortion, and yet they have to defend their policy on mifepristone at the same time.
That's a great
with
point.
the midterms coming up this year. It just it's a hot mess, as my mother would say, all around.
One last thing about denial of care is the Obamacare subsidy elimination, which was the cause of, if I remember correctly, a 43-day shutdown because the Democrats took a stand. Of course, it wasn't ever resolved in the favor of people who need the care. The impact is beginning to be felt. What are we seeing in a place like Massachusetts that has a history, as we know, of actually caring about covering people who are uncovered? What's the impact been?
Yeah. We once touted that we were, and we still can tout that we're the state's, the nation's highest insured state in the union, where we're close, near universal health care, right? We just celebrated, Jim and Marjorie, 20 years since Chapter 58 was passed. We are, as a nation, celebrating 16 years since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And in that, we understand that the celebration really means that we got people access to health insurance so that folks weren't necessarily driven to get their health care in the emergency room and spending large amounts of money getting inpatient care and, quite frankly, avoiding care and coming in sicker. So we celebrate 16 and 20 both here in Massachusetts and across the country. But the problem is, of course, when they didn't renew those ACA subsidies, we're driving people off coverage in that subsidized population because they can no longer afford the coverage. And as they sort of either step off of ACA coverage or wind down, I want to call it wind down in the sense that they choose a lower cost plan with less benefits and higher deductibles, we should all be concerned that we're losing progress in trying to keep America healthy again, if you want to say it that way. America was getting healthy with coverage, and America will absolutely, including MAGA communities, rural communities, red communities, poor communities, marginalized communities, will become sicker as people lose access to coverage.
Michael Chéry, as always, not the most upbeat discussion, but an important one. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Michael.
Bring me back for something positive.
Yeah.
That'll be a while, my friend.
We've been speaking with Michael Chéry, CEO of the Mass
Take
League
care.
of Community Health Centers and the board of the National NAACP. Coming up, we say goodbye to those of you listening on NEPM. Thank you very much for tuning in. The show continues here in Boston, though. After this quick break, Brandon Terry, a Harvard professor, is out with a book on the civil rights movement, very following up nicely on what we were discussing about the Voting Rights Act. And a warning, we romanticize the mid-century movement at our own peril in today's America. He's Jim Browdy. I'm Marjorie Egan. This is BPR, GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Do your part to support the programs you love by becoming a GBH Sustainer. Sustainers make easy monthly donations that keep the news you trust on the air, month after month, year after year. Enrolling is simple at gbh.org/sustainer.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Boston Ballet, presenting Spring Experience, a dynamic journey through movement, music, and emotions, including Jerome Robbins' celebrated Dances at a Gathering. Opens May 7th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Great.
Marjorie.
Oh, whoops. Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio.
You know how this works, by the way?
I know.
You do know how it works, right?
I was talking to our guest here.
Okay.
Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. And the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell, will be with us next Tuesday, taking our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Joined now in Studio 3 by Brandon Terry. He's the John L. Loeb Associate Professor of Social Sciences at Harvard, co-director of the Institute on Policing, Incarceration, and Public Safety at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research. He is also the author of a veritable tome about the civil rights movement, which will change the way many view it. It is called Shattered Dreams, Infinite Hope. Here's Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech from 1967 at Stanford on the other America, where he harkens back to a 59 sermon he gave at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery.
In a sense, the greatest tragedy of this other America is what it does to little children. Little children in this other America are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority forming every day in their little mental skies. And as we look at this other America, we see it as an arena of blasted hopes and shattered dreams.
Thus, the title of this amazing book. Brandon Terry, congratulations on the book. My only criticism is next book, larger font. Can we do that for people like me? It's a thrill to have you here.
That's
Thanks
the press
so much.
trying to save some money.
Exactly. Good to see you.
So one of your big themes is we just said, is that we have romanticized the civil rights movement, mythologized it. So what do you mean?
Well, first off, Jen, Marjorie, it's an honor to be here, and I
Oh.
really appreciate all you do to create a space for ideas. And,
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank
debate
you.
and dialogue. So when I use the language of romance to describe how we've told the story of the civil rights movement, I'm really trying to tap into two things at once. One is an idea that's often very unfamiliar to people, which is that histories are storytelling. And to the extent that they take on the form of stories, thinking about what genre, what's the literary form of the storytelling really matters, because genres are styles of attention toward the world. They help us organize the kind of patterns we find meaningful. They help us know what kind of emotional expectations. They train us to acknowledge or think and conceptualize what is conflict, who's the hero, what is the arc of action that seems intelligible to me. So when I say it's romantic, I really mean not just that people, which many people do, think of it as kind of triumphalist, that we've achieved everything, and you see this in the recent Supreme Court decision, that you've banished most of the vestiges of racial discrimination from American life. That can be part of it, but it's also a deeper problem about understanding the civil rights movement is fundamentally about a unity in the process of becoming, about the transcendence of good over evil, about good being somehow more essential to the American spirit, a kind of anti-racism being more fundamental than its opponent, which is the lingering and resurgent forms of white supremacy, discrimination that continue to rear their head. I'm trying to draw out those narrative forms in part to reveal how they're constraining our imagination and disfiguring our relationship to the past.
And one of the purveyors of that narrative, as you call it, is Barack Obama.
Yes.
I mean, one of the speeches, I think everybody listening will remember the speech, I think was it Howard, he gave the speech where he said, if you had to choose one moment in history in which to be born, what's the consequence of mythologizing or romanticizing today? What's the impact of doing that?
So that speech is really fascinating for a couple of reasons. So he asked the students in the audience to do this thought experiment where he says, if you could be born black at any time, what would you pick? And the force of it is supposed to be, of course, now. And isn't that supposed to give you hope? Well, that's also disfiguring in a way. It's not clear to me that the one out of every two black men born in the early 1960s, like my brothers who were incarcerated, would pick now. It's not clear. It's also not clear why we should annex our greatest political aspirations and hopes to the tragic, compromised racial orders of the American past. That fetters us in a way that is meant, and I think he meant it to do this, to reconcile us to a kind of sense that our order is somehow rational, that we don't need to subject it to radical scrutiny, radical rethinking, that all of the greatest sacrifices have already been made, and all that's left for us to do is kind of carry the ball the last 10 yards.
So does that explain one of my obsessions, which I know our listeners and viewers are so sick of? There's not a segment we do in which I don't decry the meekness of the American people in the face, including myself, in the face of white supremacist president. Is that help to explain that lack of resistance in 2026?
I heard the last conversation, and I hoped you would ask this, actually. 'Cause I thought this is exactly one of the things I'm on about in the book, is that there's a way in which we narrate our history that's comforting, because it's a story that tells you all the heroic sacrifices have already been made. Nothing equivalent will be asked of you. That is a horrific idea. It's the most, when James Baldwin complains about Americans' obsession with being innocent and not having to be in the muck and mire of struggling to make something better. That's what he's on about. We are gluttons for a fantasy where somebody else is going to do the work, where the racial demographics are going to magically make there to be a permanent Democratic majority. No, they're not. You have to get in the weeds and persuade people. You have to fight back, calling our opponents names that evoke the bad guys of the past, that's going to make them go away. No, it's not. It's going to embolden them and say, stop me the way you stopped them. Did you forget how you integrated Central High School in Little Rock? It wasn't speeches. It was force.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the voice of Brandon Terry. His book is Shattered Dreams, Infinite Hope, a tragic vision of the civil rights movement.
Well, that's one of the things you talk about, too, is that with King, with his talking about tragedy, the tragic that we don't want to face up to or we don't want to go through. What do you mean?
Well, I think we have a hard time when we tell the story of the civil rights movement confronting that there are losses at the heart of victory, right? That unity, that impulse to narrating with a kind of sense that everyone is, everyone's in on the civil rights movement. It's a mass act of solidarity, that America coalesces around a kind of new set of values. It ignores both the people who were left behind in the ghettos, in the rural areas, and explains again in part why some people aren't rallying because they haven't experienced the last 5 decades as some emancipatory period. They've experienced it as a decline of social mobility, the age of mass incarceration, the age of extraordinary wealth inequality, right? We have to reckon with that loss. And we also have to reckon with the fact that, as my colleague, the great scholar Larry Bobo, has documented over and over again, there's just an enormous percentage of people who hold openly racist views. You think 10% is not a lot, 15% is not a lot. It's a lot of people, right? It's a lot of people in the United States of America. And so when you have these things that have not been domesticated in some imagined civil rights consensus that we make the object of our romance, you're not prepared for reality as it is.
I was telling Jim, I was mentioning in terms of not prepared for reality as it is. I was watching 60 Minutes. I'm obsessed with taping 60 Minutes to see how much Barry Weiss and CBS is going to try to water it down every week, so I always tape it. And the first segment was this kid, he was a young guy, young white guy, white supremacist, absolutely unapologetic, talking about how they go into, try to get to FEMA, to get these disasters before FEMA gets there, so they can run around, helping somebody rebuild their house or give them water. They don't stay, but they come initially. But the reporter says to him, "But you're only helping white people." And he said, "That's right. We're only helping white people. We're only helping my people." And I sat there, I thought, wow, he's just saying it right out loud. Basically, screw the black people or screw people who came here from Mexico or whatever. And that shows my naivete, I guess.
The Manhattan Institute, so this is not some left-wing thing. Manhattan Institute has a new study out where they interview GOP members. 31% of the people they interview under the age of 50 say that they themselves openly hold views that they would characterize as racist, right? So what you're seeing is that romantic story that was meant to hold a kind of anti-racist consensus, the idea that even Ronald Reagan would have to genuflect to the grandeur of Dr. King. That is dissolving all around us.
Yeah.
But you also say, while you suggest we should resist the urge to romanticize this era, you also reject Afro-pessimism.
Yes.
Explain what it is and explain what you're saying.
So, one response to some of the things I'm saying might be to say, well, nothing has changed. That the civil rights movement was functionally a non-event in American history. And that what the true story of American life and perhaps even modernity since the advent of European colonialism is just anti-blackness everywhere, right? So there's a group of intellectuals known as Afro-pessimists who have become very influential saying things like this. Your popular audience may know some of the more extreme arguments of a Ta-Nehisi Coates that can sound sort of similar. But the real philosophical position of Afro-pessimism has sought to substantiate this view, and they have no hope, right? They think that hope is just a form of cruel optimism, a way of continuing to attach you to an American society that just exploits and degrades and brutalizes Black people again and again. I want to resist that view as well, and try to give people some reasons, a different grounds for what I think of as a different kind of hope, a tragic hope.
So, but you're basically saying you're incredibly brilliant research, and the depth of this is just stunning. In a non-academic response, you're basically saying live in the real world. I mean, isn't that the basic message?
It's a yes. And
yes, but where's the but?
Not but. It's because they want to say they're living in the real world. So what I want to say is the following, and I think your listeners will recognize people like this. There's a way in which sometimes the people who are constantly pointing out to you the flaws, the defeats, the disappointments, they narrate the world with an ironic view. Everything is about unmasking something to show that it's other than what it looks like. Every triumph is revealed to be a defeat. I understand that impulse, but lurking behind it is a sense of, a longing for, a longing for a kind of purity or permanence, a perfection. That's not the life of human beings. We can't use an imagined world in which we don't suffer, struggle, have to negotiate the terms of coexistence with others. We can't use that imagination to bludgeon the hard-earned victories of our real life together. Every time human beings negotiate a way of living together with some kind of decency and dignity, grasping toward justice, that's a profoundly beautiful thing. It's not everything. We have to keep track of the defeat and the despair, but it is a beautiful thing, and we cannot wash that away with the kind of ironic solipsism that is self-aggrandizing to the person who delivers it to an audience that they think of as naive.
You're a Baltimore kid, right?
Yeah.
How old were you when you got this? I'm serious.
Yeah.
I don't obviously. No, I'm serious. Did you grow up?
A little less philosophy.
No.
Yeah.
When did you basically say this is not this romanticized thing that?
Sure. That part was evident right away. I lived it.
How so? So
my father was incarcerated in federal prison. My two older brothers spent almost my entire life in federal and state prison. So my brother was arrested when I was in the first grade, came home the year I graduated from Harvard College. I grew up around a lot of drug addiction. You could see the poverty. You could see the glaring racial inequality.
How was the Harvard kid viewed in your community?
Well, everybody was extraordinarily supportive. I mean, I just, I never had any of that stuff. I know people write about the idea of like acting white or, the resentment. I never had any of that. My experience of Black working class community in Baltimore was people believing in you and hoping that you would do something extraordinary, that you would defend their dignity, that you would represent them on every stage that you managed to make it to. I received nothing but love from people, totally truthfully.
So, Brandon Terry, you also... I'm sorry, Margaret.
I was just going to say, though, this is one of my recurring themes, but back when we were down with Black Lives Matter, we talked about during the pandemic and stuff, and you mentioned Ta-Nehisi Coates. I remember hearing him in a podcast talking about how the GI Bill really didn't work for if you were Black, and I thought, wow, I didn't know that. Or we read the new Jim Crow, which kind of codified how if you're African American, you're going to very likely to get screwed in the criminal justice system. And she went down, chapter and verse with what you get charged with and the prosecutor get and all that kind of stuff. I remember we talked a million times about Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street that was like burned down again. So I kind of, again...
I thought you were going to say, and the most incredible part of that
the kid from Tulsa?
During we were talking about it, we only learned about it, unfortunately, because of Trump and the event he had scheduled. We had a young Black kid call from Tulsa. Do you remember?
Yes.
And he said he learned about what happened in Tulsa by listening to our show. Growing up there, he did not know about what had happened. But where are we going with this?
The point was, I thought that as we talked more about these things and you learned more about these things, you'd have a much broader understanding. Yeah. Especially if you were white and this is not the life you were living, what people went through. And now it's kind of like We can't even have any plaques up honoring, great African Americans because we have a president that doesn't want them there. So it's like we went here and then we went there.
Yeah. Well, Marjorie, it's a really deep question that we don't ask ourselves honestly enough, right? We have a lot of social scientific evidence that says when you prime people with more information about how they got the advantages they have in the world, about how unfair things are on the basis of race and class, they become actually more hostile to ameliorative efforts.
So what do you do with that?
Wow.
So, one of my favorite studies ever is like, if you give white Americans information about how the death penalty is racist, it makes the sample pool more in favor of the death penalty. So why does that matter? It matters because you have to really get into the weeds about your theory of transformation. So one of the things I think is important is I'm a scholar of Dr. King's political philosophy, not just his action.
Right.
One of the things I really like about dwelling in his thinking is that he's always trying to link our emotions, our affect, our psychological subconscious to a political vision. Right. His thing, I think a lot of what has happened over the last 15, 20 years is people think just because I'm getting a reaction or just because I'm saying a thing, I'm doing politics. You're not theorizing, how am I turning this particular reaction into the transformation I want to see? Just because I'm disrupting something or drawing attention to it, it may not be managing the emotions, the affects, the fears that I'm activating. King and his allies were extremely thoughtful and sophisticated about what are the paranoias structuring racial politics in the United States. One is the fear of revenge and vengeance. What do you hear about Barack Obama still to this day? That he was out to destroy white people, that he had this secret agenda, that, he's the one who racialized American politics. Well, that's a deep-seated fear and paranoia that you have to have a theory of how to deal with. His theory was inadequate. He didn't prepare progressives or Democratic Party or his allies for exactly how to manage the volatile emotions and paranoias that he unleashed existing.
So you're saying if you're white and you found out the death penalty was racist toward black people, you'd want to keep it that way, so you'd be less likely to be executed yourself. Is that the?
Well, it's not my study. It's a study that
what's
said
the social science?
Why? The basic view is that one of two things may be happening. One is that you have a large group of white people who think that demands for racial justice and racial equality are just strategies for power.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
They're just moves in a game to claw back advantages that are undeserved, right? And that they're part of the myth making around liberalism. The other hand, you might have this worry, I think many people do, that people are exposing the things in your life that you think of as your own achievements as built upon a whole edifice of injustice. And most of us want to identify with our achievements. That we want to think that we've done some great thing or that our parents did some great thing. We don't want to think of our grandparents as complicit in one of the most extraordinary evils of the 20th century. That's how I got my house.
Yeah.
That's how I got my college education. That it's entangled in that. I can't identify with it in the same way. And so you have a vicious reaction, a dissociative reaction to that information. You don't want to know it. It's motivated ignorance.
So how does your analysis, what does it predict for how America responds to 2.5 more years of a Trump?
Well, I try not to make predictions. In fact, one of the reasons I say hope instead of optimism. Optimists make predictions. Hopeful people get to work. So what do I hope happens? In the book, I draw on the great German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who, when writing about art, makes this distinction between imitation and emulation. Yeah. Imitation is like you going into the art museum and you see a Warhol or something and you just trace it. You're not creating...
With no understanding of what the hell you're doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like that's imitative. emulation is trying to create from the same sources, the same aesthetic ideas, the same source of genius. That's what I want to push us toward in our relationship to the civil rights movement. That's the only way I think the exemplarity of the civil rights movement will survive. So you take something like the Voting Rights Act. The point isn't just to restore what we had, because what we had wasn't sufficient, or else it would still be here, right? It wasn't sufficient, or else we wouldn't have the kind of society we have. We need to draw from the same sources of creativity to ask ourselves, how did these activists and intellectuals and ordinary people struggle to create a bundle of things that we associate with the idea of voting rights to radically reform our democracy? How did they do that? What are the sources of creativity they're drawing from? And then try to draw from those same wells ourselves. For us, that might look really different. It might look like open party primaries. It might look like democratic renovation practices. It might look like nonpartisan redistricting. Reform of campaign finance.
Isn't that some of the stuff your buddy Danielle Allen over there is talking about,
exactly.
right?
Danielle is, I think, really at the forefront of this. And one of the things I hope happens with her movement in this moment is to connect it with the to better connect it with the moral authority and the intellectual legacy of the civil rights movement. Because I think we're in this moment of crisis where people are seeing some of the things they thought were solid melt into air.
We only have a minute or two. I'm hoping you'll come back soon because we have about a million more things we have on our list to talk to you about.
Anytime, I'm right down the street.
Okay, we had Elizabeth Hinton in here a bunch of times. I know, and she's at Yale, and she wrote America on Fire, and great. I think that's why she was in a year or so ago. You were co-director with her of the Institute on Policing, Incarceration, and Public Safety. Yes. Just give us a taste. What are you doing there?
Oh, we're doing some extraordinary work. So we've got this great data science program where we're doing some of the most cutting edge research and mapping every single drug-free school zone in America, showing how these arbitrary sentence enhancements are being used to bully people into really unjust and arbitrary plea bargains, and affect rates of racial disparity and incarceration. We're doing a bunch of things that we call hard conversations. So one of the things I've been really animated by is that when we talk about incarceration and public safety and policing, many people dodge the hard questions and then kind of retreat into their ideological silos. We are really on the front lines of staging very, very difficult questions about prison abolition, about the influence of hip hop music on gang culture, about collateral consequences, and really taking the full breadth of political positions. So it's been an exciting collaborative.
Would you come back with her soon?
Anytime.
And then the two of you could talk. And is there a
to.
website for this operation?
Yes, up on the Hutchins Center website.
Okay, great. And by the way, we're urging you to get the book too. Check out the website. The book is Shattered Dreams, Infinite Hope. Book is really eye-opening and great. We really appreciate your time.
All these great reviews, including from the New York Times. La da. Thank you very much.
We were very happy to get that.
Well,
100 books of the year.
Yeah, 100 books of the year. Yeah. I should have mentioned that too. Congratulations, Brandon Terry. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Brandon Terry is the John L. Loeb Associate Professor of the Social Sciences at Harvard University and co-director of the Institute on Policing, Incarceration, and Public Safety at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research. The book, here's the title, give it to you twice, Shattered Dreams, Infinite Hope, A Tragic Vision of the Civil Rights Movement. That is Shattered Dreams, Infinite Hope, A Tragic Vision of the Civil Rights Movement. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Coming up after this quick break, Chaplain Clementina Chéry, founder of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. She zooms in ahead of their 30th annual Mother's Day Walk for Peace. I'm Marjorie and he's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, if you've ever been on the receiving end of a thoughtful care package, there's actually a group you have to thank for its invention. Yes, invention. Today we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the care package with the CEO of the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe. Do I have to spell it out for you? That's the Curiosity Desk today at 1 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Museum of Science, Boston. With winter in the rear view, the museum's spring exhibits include science in action, interactive engineering experiences, and a robot roundup featuring autonomous machines. MOS.org. And MIT Federal Credit Union, committed to delivering financial services that help members bank with confidence. Membership's open to the public. More at mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA.
Welcome back to BPR and 89.7 GBH. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday and Friday. Chaplain Clementina Chéry, who happens to be one of our favorite people, is the founder, president, and CEO of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, founded in 94 after the murder of her 15-year-old son, Louis, who was on his way to a Christmas party for a group called Teens Against Gun Violence. This coming Sunday, the group will host their 30th annual Mother's Day Walk for Peace. Go to LDB, that's in Louis D. Brown, ldbpeaceinstitute.org for more information. Clementina Chéry joins us now. It's great to see you as always.
Yeah, great to see you, and congratulations on the 30 years. And Jim and I were saying before, 30 years ago, this was just a little teeny bit of hope and planning. What has happened in those 30 years? What are some of the highlights of what you've managed to do, Clementina Chéry?
Well, thank you so much again for having me. And I love being here and really sharing, and always excited to do this. Highlights, it's really that it's sustainable. And it's sustainable because of the people. It is sustainable because of people like you guys, the media, giving us opportunity to really tell our story of peace, of healing, of who we are as a community, and not about all the bad things that continue to happen. So that's the highlight. And this year we're having special after walk, Mother's Day massages for some mothers.
Oh, great.
Yes, we have a band coming in. Our logo was designed by our young Peace Fellow artists. So this year is really, again, I think it's moved beyond the Peace Institute. And it's really showing what happens when community is committed to peace and healing.
Yeah, but you're being too modest. First of all, to say the media's done a good job, try saying no to Clementina Chéry. People don't do that. That's one. For example, just months ago, you broke ground on something that was unimaginable a bunch of years ago. Explain what's happening and what's going to happen in that place.
Oh,
please.
my goodness. Thank you. Yes. So we broke ground on what's going to be the first in the country, a National Center of Healing, Teaching, and Learning. Now, if you look like me, I'm a Black woman, an immigrant woman, a poor woman who has the audacity of raising $25 million to build this National Center of Healing, Teaching, and Learning in what the city considers one of the most violent neighborhoods. That's my backyard. So September 21st, which is International Day of Peace, we did a very soft launch of, again, showing the community where this center is going to be, and really looking for what I call peace vestors, champions to help us raise these funds. We need 7.5 to begin construction this year. And so I'm so excited about that.
Explain what's going to happen in that building once you do raise the remaining money to Clementina
Well,
Chéry.
what's going to happen is exactly what we're doing now, continuing to be a center of healing, teaching, and learning, continue to be a safe space for community that's not a church, not a police department, not a court, not a public space, to continue to respond to families in that first 24 to 72 hours, while at the same time providing a safe space for those men that are coming back home. And then also preparing for Generation Peace, where we are teaching young people the value of peace through the 7 principles of peace: love, unity, faith, hope, courage, justice, and forgiveness. Our policy and advocacy. And then we're not replicating the Peace Institute. We are then taking our models, our tools, and our philosophy, and we're transferring our knowledge, where people are coming from across the country to really understand, one, how do you transform the way our city responds to families impacted by murder? Wow, cultivating cycles of peace.
You know, I feel, I've said this to you a lot of times. I almost feel like I knew your son because I've heard you speak about him so beautifully, and so many other people who knew him. What do you think about Louis on the 30th anniversary of this Mother's Day?
Yeah, this is where, thanks for that question, Jim. This is where I think sometimes when I'm stopped to ask, that's why sometimes it's bittersweet doing interviews. I'm an outcome person. I stay focused on what I need to do. Oof, and when I take time to stop and breathe is when it really hits me. Louis would say, why do you always have to make such a big deal about everything? Literally, when he would get an A in school, my job, I would have posters. When he would get a D on his report cards, I will show it to everybody. And for me, he is really, Louis believed he was going to be famous one day and would not have to work hard for it. He paid the ultimate price. On his headstone, it says, his life for our salvation. And so for me, Louis is really, okay, I see what you're doing. You're keeping my dream alive. My vision of, again, if true peace is to be achieved, it would be up to my generation, regardless of which side of the streets they come from. And that's what's happening within the Peace Institute. I'm 65, Jim. I'm ready to just say I'm done. Yet it's the generation that the young people in the high school, and then the young people, if Louis was alive, he would have been 48. And that's who's leading this journey. So he would say, okay, I see what you're doing. Keep it up. I'm with you. I'm supporting you.
I remember a long time ago, Clementina, Chéry, talking to you about expenses that poor parents may deal with when they lose a child through violence. And you were trying at one point to get costs covered for cemeteries so that they would take in a child, the body, to bury the body. I wonder where that is these years later. What do people do that have no insurance? They have no money. How do they bury their child?
So we've come a long way, baby. You know that commercial that says we've come a long way, baby? We have really worked with the city of Boston to create a burial fund for cemetery. We manage that fund and we provide that, and it goes directly to the cemetery. The state has a victim compensation.
Ignore that. That was a mistake. Keep
That's
talk.
okay.
Go ahead.
It's music time. The state has a state victim compensation, but again, that's a fund of last resort. So working with the city of Boston to make sure those who are killed in Boston can be buried in the cemeteries. Yet there's also that statewide. So a part of this fundraising also is to raise funds to make sure families do not have to do that GoFundMe.
Yes.
Because state victim compensation is a fund of last resort. So you have to spend the money to then get reimbursed for the money. So at the Peace Institute, that's something, no questions asked, that we raise the funds if it's statewide, or also we work with families who have to bury their loved ones across the country, not just in Massachusetts, to make sure that that hearse can go into that cemetery so the family can bury their loved ones.
Yeah, that's a great thing. That's a great thing. I'm glad.
Clementina, Chéry, before you go, I mentioned that I want you to tell people that they can go to the website to find out the details, but I want you to say where people should be on Sunday. I want to repeat what we said to Michael Patrick McDonald about Mother's Day Walk for Peace. For those who think it's an event that is going to be, covered in sorrow, my experience has been at many of these, it's a celebration of the life of people who were lost by those who love them, rather than talking about how they died. Where do people go, and what are the logistics on Sunday?
So the logistics are on Sunday. We start at Town Field, Fields Corner Park in Dorchester. 1565 Dorchester Ave, schedule 7 a.m. You can do on-site registration. 8 a.m. the program begins. 9 a.m. we have a kickoff, and 11:30 we come back for closing. You can go on to mothersdaywalkforpeace.org, and the route is 3.5. And we have, if you want to volunteer, you're welcome to do that also. There are buses. You can order wheelchairs if you cannot walk. We really want to make sure that everybody is available to walk, and then also stay with us for the post celebration that we are going to celebrate. And Jim, yes, the first year you invited me, you showed up and you showed out. So still with your viewers, because it's not a day of sadness. We will show who we are as families impacted by murder, and also showing those who come into Dorchester to really support who we are in this community.
Clementina, Chéry, you're unbelievable. It is great to talk to you. See you Sunday.
Great to
Be
talk
well.
to you.
Take care.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Have a blessed one. No, thank you for the invitation always.
We have been
Ciao.
We've been speaking with Clementina Chéry, founder, president, CEO of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute in Boston. The website, ldbpeaceinstitute.org, which stands for Louis D. Brown, ldpeaceinstitute.org for more information about the Mother's Day March.
Start your Mother's Day there and then go out and do whatever you do with your family. Bring your family, but then, it's a good way to start the day, and it's really important.
Coming up after this quick break, we will open the lines for another workplace check-in. Last week, we talked about all the businesses pushing workers back to the office. Today, we're getting into a side effect of that prescription: office, bathroom, toothbrushers. How do you feel about that? The lines are open next. 877-301-8970. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
School bullying remains pervasive in Massachusetts, and records show many schools turning a blind eye to the problem.
Parents want to protect their kids. They're filing the complaint. They're asking for follow-up. They're asking the school to protect the kids. And the schools are ignoring these complaints.
I'm Chris Burrell from the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. That story later today on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance will help you manage life's storms.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping customers achieve their vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding them from design to completion. With showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow. As Marjorie said, we're ending the show with a workplace dilemma. We're sure on time, so join us soon if you choose to. As the great return to the office continues, you may have noticed an uptick in questionable behavior, brushing your teeth at work. A columnist in the New York Times boldly declares, quote, "In public workplaces, people should endeavor to avoid kissing, spitting, lip smacking, whistling, humming, gargling, sloshing, tongue clicking, and yes, brushing or flossing for the sake of professionalism, cleanliness, tranquility, and concentration." I could not agree more. As I've said many times on the show through the years, I am disgusted by, I'm disgusted
That's right.
by people
Yeah.
who brush their teeth in bathrooms
Okay.
at work.
I think it may be a true confession moment here, Jim.
What do you mean?
What do you were disgusted by people who brush their teeth
I said that
in the
just now.
bathroom. What does the word Invisalign mean to you?
It's a word, actually, that I have spoken to you that I said, please don't mention on the radio. So here's thank you for that.
Mr. Invisalign
So here's
is with us.
the deal.
Yeah.
I am appalled by when I go in a
Appalled,
bathroom,
yeah.
at any public bathroom, a restaurant, at work, whatever, and somebody's brushing their teeth and spitting out in the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is true, and that is my position. By the way, it remains my position.
Uh-huh.
My position, however, has been slightly, I wouldn't even say amended, adjusted.
Okay.
I do have Invisalign. Don't ask
Teeth
why.
are looking good, Jim.
Thank you. Don't
Very
ask
good.
why. I'm almost done. I have 10 more weeks and I'm done.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's why you're lisping on the radio. Yes, it is why I'm lisping on the radio.
Are you lisping?
I am lisping. I
didn't
hear it.
even notice.
In any case, that's not my point. But so what you got to do is every time you eat something, before you put the Invisalign back in, you got to go brush your teeth. So what I do out of respect, we don't need that. Thank you. What I do out of respect.
Don't you floss too?
I have not. I might.
Aren't your gums really doing marvelously
They're the
well
best
now?
they've ever been. Thank you. Okay, let me finish my thought.
Gums are getting a
I
workout.
still do not go and would never go to a common bathroom sink and do it. What I do go is we have individual bathrooms which are locked.
Yep.
I occasionally, when I have to, when I eat, which is almost never now at work because of the Invisalign.
I know.
Before I put them back in, like I've had a cup of coffee, got to brush teeth, I go down there and I do it. And you know what I do to the sink after I brush my teeth?
Well, I should hope so.
I wash out the sink because I don't want people who are disgusted by the behavior like I was to be submitted to it.
To see food pieces and toothpaste in the sink.
That is totally
so
unnecessary,
take the paper
too.
towel and you clean out the bowl of the sink. That's very good. I've seen you go to the communal bathroom. You claim you're not brushing your teeth in there, but
well, there are other
that's not
things you
what
do
I
in
hear.
that communal
There's
bathroom.
other things you do in there. I'm not convinced.
Now,
you're
by
not
the
there,
way,
too.
instead of asking you to call at 877-301-8970, since I asked Marjorie not to mention my Invisalign, I'm going to tell you a couple things Marjorie doesn't want mentioned on the air. Also, for the next 10 minutes.
Like what?
I'm serious. I could really.
I have, because of your inspiring performance,
Inspiration.
Jim, I have begun to floss twice a day now. Because I've noticed your gums are really looking
They
good.
are the finest. I feel they're as good as they've ever been.
But they have one of these stories.
Can we
which,
get back
of
to
course,
the world show's almost
I've lost,
over?
But in the story that I had before that I can't find now, but I
good.
think they said 60% of toothbrushes that are used in bathrooms have fecal matter on them. 60%. 60%. I guess it's flying around in the air.
Can I tell you
know why
something?
it's flying around in the air? From those electric hand dryers.
Okay, let me explain
Don't
something to you.
use those.
Even
They
if you
spread
don't have a
germs.
toothbrush in the bathroom, you know what's flying around the bathroom? Fecal matter. The issue is not.
We don't give a crap about.
Okay, fine.
It's because of
the
those
issue,
air things. It's
you're
because of
destroying
those
this
electric
discussion.
things.
The number is 877-301-897. The discussion, this is typical. The discussion we're trying to have is a narrow discussion. How do you feel about people who, I will focus it so that I'm not culpable here. How do you feel about people who in communal bathrooms, I don't mean unisex bathrooms, I mean communal bathrooms where more than one person uses at a time, you walk in and somebody's brushing their teeth in the sink. I continue to be disgusted by it.
Okay.
If you're required, yourself. If you're required to do it because, as in my case, you have Invisalign, which was nobody's business till about 3 minutes ago, and you have to do it. You do it in a separate bathroom or you don't do it at all. 877, this is hopeless.
We have some good texts here.
877-301-8970. What?
How else do you cover up the smell of rum, says one of our texters. Then how about cleaning your earwax at your desk? I sit next to a dude who did that.
Okay, fine.
And then would you rather have lettuce hanging out of your teeth, ready to brush, don't you think? Wash the sink afterwards. That's Mo from Framingham. And Paul from Fort Lauderdale says, Jim is straightening his teeth now, so he'll be ready down the road to be hot in the nursing home with a
By the
great
way,
smile.
they're not straight. I want to be clear. I didn't intend to get into this either. There's a bite issue.
A bite issue.
A bite issue. So it's not an issue of straightness.
Yep.
It's a question of how they interact with each
Okay,
other.
all
Okay.
right.
Let's take Sharon in
Hi,
Boston.
Sharon.
Thank God you called, Sharon. Hello.
Hey guys, so I'm in a parking lot, so I hope you can hear me.
We can.
But okay, good. So first off, I have to say I'm really kind of floored by the fact that Jim is so grossed out by somebody brushing their teeth and flossing in a bathroom as opposed to having bad breath or things hanging out of their teeth because they didn't floss.
That's right.
I'm kind of flabbergasted by that. And also I have to say I work as a makeup artist. And so people brush their teeth constantly in the bathroom, and I am so grateful because the worst thing when you're working as a makeup artist is to have somebody come in with bad breath or junk hanging out of their teeth.
Well, you know, hey, Sharon, since you're criticizing me, if I may, what's the word you said? You're disgusted, or what did you say?
This must be your makeup
I'm talking
artist
to Sharon.
from previous years
Sharon,
when you were on TV.
No, it's not. It's Phoebe. You know who Phoebe is.
I do.
Sharon, what was the word you say? Oh, flabbergasted.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to know, Marjorie will speak to this. I have never, ever come to work with bad breath or with stuff hanging out of my teeth, as you described a minute
I think
ago.
you've had an occasional piece of spinach. Haven't we
No,
all?
I don't think you come that way. I think after you eat lunch, it could end up that way
Yeah.
accidentally to anyone, not just to you.
Sharon.
Well, you know what I've noticed over the years? Spinach. Spinach is really tough. You know, you have a spinach salad. You don't realize all the spinach is like between
Cut in a
your
really
teeth.
small piece.
Yeah, you
Sharon,
have
that's
to
a
bring
rather
them
hostile
nearer.
phone call. Thank you for making it. she sort of cut to the chase of the whole experience here, kind of thing. And I hear, and she's flabbergasted that I'm disgusted. And again, so I guess my compromise is go to a bathroom that is a single-use bathroom.
Yes.
Where other people don't have to witness you doing this and clean up after yourself.
You know, I found one of those in one of those Invisalign things in the single-use bathroom a couple of weeks ago.
This was unbelievable, and it wasn't mine.
It wasn't yours. I posted, and no one ever came to claim it.
Yeah.
I had it on a paper towel.
By the way, let me just say, if people don't really understand the it's not the quality, but the kind of relationship Margie and I have, I have said to her, I'd say a minimum of, let me just be conservative here. I've said to her maybe 70 times since I got Invisalign, don't mention them on the air, okay? Maybe 170 times I've said it. That obviously wasn't, the message didn't quite get across. You know what I'm saying?
Well, when we talked about doing a story about people brushing their teeth in the sink, it seemed like it was the obvious moment to come out of the closet, Jim, with the Invisalign.
Maybe that was my choice, not yours. No, really. Maybe it was my choice to come out of the closet or come out of the bathroom with my Invisalign rather than yours, Marjorie. Jesse and Hingham, you're next. Welcome to the show. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, thanks for having me. Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
I completely agree with Jim.
Good.
When I was in law school, I was in a clinic that was situated next to the bathroom. And one day I saw someone take an entire tray of food from the cafeteria, open food, and go into the bathroom, put it on the counter next to the sink, and proceed to use the bathroom and then leave with the food. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, they applied to be in our clinic, and I had to blackball them because I thought they had terrible decision-making.
Oh, wow.
This is my kind of person. Can you call Sharon and read her the riot act, Jesse, if I get her number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just really was concerning. And then, Jim, if you're interested in a good flosser, they have electric flossers that are life-changing now.
Wait, what do you mean? You don't mean the water thing, do you? Because that
Water
hurts.
No.
What's an
Not the
electric
water thing.
flosser?
It's called-
Flosser.
It looks like an electric toothbrush, but it has floss heads on it.
Oh.
And I have literally bought it for all of my friends, my husband. It's the best. They had it on Shark Tank.
Wow, I am so
Jim,
there.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, Jesse.
Electric flosser.
Can I tell you something?
Doesn't get any better
Probably
than that.
our most famous shows of all of them, Jesse, thanks for the call, have been about using Q-tips. Do you remember those shows? I do. And one of our listeners coined the phrase eargasm because it is quite joyful. Flossing for a lot of people is a similar sort of experience.
No,
Have
this
you
could
found
be
that?
a new pastime for you. You got
An
the
electric
Q-tips.
flosser.
And then you move on.
You have a Q-tip in one hand, the electric flosser in the other hand. I assume it's a one-hand kind of thing.
Paradise.
It is really incredible. And if you can have a coworker
died
brushing your
and gone
teeth
to
while you're
heaven.
doing it, you can do everything. It's really incredible. We've sort of gotten off topic, but I think the consensus, despite Sharon's position.
Here's a question for
What's
you,
that?
Jim.
What is it?
The cretin who grabs food from other people's plates while publicly dining is
That'd be me.
appalled by the hygienic practice of toothbrushing in a private restroom? 4 question marks?
No, private restroom I'm not against at all. In a restroom that someone can walk in while you're brushing your teeth and you have to spit out the stuff afterwards, I'm against that. If the door is closed and you're a restroom, as it's called, a bathroom, whatever, by yourself, a one-person operation, then as long as you clean up after yourself,
All right.
I'm okay.
Now, this person travels a lot on airplanes,
Yeah.
and they say they often brush their teeth in the bathroom when they arrive at the airport. So when I greet whoever's picking me
I don't
up,
like
I
that.
can have fresh breath. You want to put a stop to that, Jim?
Well, a lot of people. Have you ever brushed your teeth at the end of a flight? You go back to that little tiny
No.
room that you can't. You don't?
I chew gum.
I
put
always
a piece
do.
I put something in my mouth, like
Really?
water or a mint or gum.
You know what I'm going to be using on my next flight? An electric flosser. Seriously, am I going to get that, Jesse? How
I don't
great
know.
is
I haven't
that
heard
gonna
of that.
be?
Have you heard of that?
Jesse, just call.
Why have our
You
dentist
listen to
not told
her?
us about that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I own every other little gimmick. Now, sadly, time is up.
Oh, we're out of time.
Time is up. This is worthy of like a 3-hour discussion, and we gave it like 3 minutes.
I think the food that's most likely to stick in your teeth
Spinach,
is
you
it not
said that.
spinach? Why is that? I mean, why don't
Well, there are
why
other
doesn't
things.
kale
I don't think
stick
we
in
need
there?
kale.
Or romaine lettuce.
Yeah, because nobody likes kale. That's why it doesn't stick in there. You know, and you got to rub kale. Do you know when you get
How
kale?
about arugula?
You're supposed to massage kale.
You're supposed to massage it.
And you have to cut the little
Yeah.
stem things out and
Yeah.
whatever. Okay,
Do you
well,
like
that
arugula,
was
Jim?
a totally
You hear that sound? Oh.
Exactly. I mean, I agree with him one time on this one kind of
Okay.
thing. Okay.
Thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. I hope we solved your problems with toothbrushing in the bathroom. Keep up with us 24/7.
We're going to do a segment on flossing just in the next week or so, because we are. I'm sorry, we are.
That's what you're also doing in the bathroom, as I understand it from our eagle-eyed coworkers,
Well,
Jim. Jim is
maybe I am.
flossing furiously. Electric flosser is next. Anyway, by way of our podcast, you
Best
can check us
gums
out.
in Massachusetts right now, I'm proud to say. I don't want to brag, but I would say they're in the top 10.
Okay. Tomorrow we're going to be live at the
They're
Boston
really
Public Library. CNN's John
Good
King is going to be with us. BC Sports Authority, Trinity Casey, the ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose. We want to thank our great crew, Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, Ariana Gonzalez, Maddie Guy, and Bill Francis on our YouTube cameras today. Our engineer is John LaClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jay Bologna. Stay tuned to the Curiosity Desk starting immediately after us on 89.7 GBH. The Culture Show starts at 2. Jazz going to speak with Jill Medvedow, Director Emerita of the Institute of Contemporary Art. That should be great. I am Marjorie Egan, and I'm proud to be here with the man with the best gums in Massachusetts.
Well, I didn't say best gums. I said best 10 in the top 10.
Okay, top 10.
And by the way, Pledge starts on Wednesday. We hope to have a Jim and Marjorie electric flosser available for $10 a month, $120 all at once. We'll let you know. Tune in on Wednesday. See you tomorrow at the library.
Bye.
Bye.
From the stories of centuries past to discoveries that will define our future, How Did We Get Here's, how-tos, and more. Journey with us down the rabbit hole on the Curiosity Desk. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of outdoor furniture delivered throughout New England, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories for spring. Seasons4.com. And Speakeasy Stage, presenting Swept Away. 4 New Bedford whalers must confront who they are and what they've done as they fight to survive a shipwreck, with music by the Avett Brothers. Now through May 23rd. SpeakeasyStage.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, if you've ever been on the receiving end of a thoughtful care package, there's actually a group you have to thank for its invention. Yep, I said invention. Today we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the care package with the CEO of the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe. Do we have to spell it out for you? Then our latest entry in our occasional look at 250 years of groundbreaking, innovative, and yes, revolutionary American music. Today, one music writer sets the record straight on what he says everyone gets wrong about the ephemeral, inscrutable Bob Dylan. And what's the weirdest thing one might buy at an Oddities and Curiosities expo? If you answered taxidermied possum with a glass of wine, you're close. That's all ahead this hour on the Curiosity Desk.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. military says the Navy helped 2 U.S.-flagged commercial ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz. NPR's Greg Myrie reports this comes as President Trump announced he has a plan to assist vessels attempting to get past the Iranian blockade.
The U.S. military Central Command said Navy destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz and are actively assisting an effort to restore commercial shipping. As a first step, the U.S. forces helped 2 U.S.-flagged merchant ships make it through the strait. President Trump said Sunday the U.S. would support ships trapped in the Gulf, but did not specify what action the U.S. would take. However, the Iranian state media quoted a top military official as saying that Iran would target oil tankers and other commercial ships that do not coordinate with Iran before passing through the strait. The dueling U.S. and Iranian blockades have effectively shut down the strait. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
The Supreme Court has paved the way for people to access the abortion medication mifepristone by mail for now. NPR's Chéry Johnson reports a lower court restricted access to the pills nationwide last week.
That ruling Friday from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals required patients to obtain mifepristone in person, prompting confusion and lawsuits. Makers of the drug filed emergency petitions asking the Supreme Court to step in. Justice Sam Alito, acting for the High Court, has now restored access to mifepristone by mail, at least for another week while the justices consider the issue. Medication abortions account for nearly two-thirds of such procedures in the U.S. Doctors who prescribe the pills by mail have been sending them to people in rural areas and states where the procedure has been banned. Nearly 4 years ago, the Supreme Court took away the nationwide right to abortion in a decision written by Justice Alito. Chéry Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
The outcome of Indiana's primaries tomorrow will reveal if President Trump makes good on his threat to derail the campaigns of 7 incumbent Republican state senators who voted against his mid-decade redistricting push in the state. The primaries being held tomorrow in Indiana and Ohio will also test how the GOP fares against Democrats, with the economy and the fallout from the Iran war top of mind for many voters. NPR's Domenico Montanaro has a new analysis.
But Republicans maintain that at the end of the day, they will retain control, even if it's narrowly, and they point out that they're on offense in some places too. But the top of their list is Michigan. A win there would throw a serious monkey wrench into Democrats' takeover plans, but they think that places like Georgia and New Hampshire could also be very close in the end for Republicans.
That's NPR's Domenico Montanaro reporting. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Thousands of climate experts have converged on Boston for Climatech 2026, which is a two-day event that starts today at the Boston Center for the Arts. According to its press release, Climatech, now in its third year, is the premier event for technology, business, policy, academia, and finance leaders to come together and with a 100% focus on driving real climate impact. The event is part of Boston Climate Week, which runs through next Sunday, May 10th. Over 100 events bring together over 5,000 attendees to promote Boston's transition to a sustainable, resilient future. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu will speak at the opening reception a little later today at 5 p.m. And things are heating up between Republican candidate for Governor Mike Minogue and Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, and you can add GOP member Brian Shortsleeve to the mix as well. Appearing on WCVB's On the Record yesterday, Minogue said state spending was blowing up. He pledged to audit the whole state budget. Also claimed public appropriations are being squandered on waste and fraud, and waved off allegations by Healey that he is an extreme candidate. The State House News Service reports that Minogue used his time to add that he's Catholic and pro-life, but understands that the mass electorate at large supports a slate of state laws that protect reproductive rights. Meanwhile, the spokesperson for Republican gubernatorial hopeful Brian Shortsleeve says Minogue's comments gave Maura Healey all the ammunition she'll need to defeat him in November. 65 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
Welcome to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We're streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Now, at some point in your life, I'm guessing you may have been the recipient of a care package. Maybe you were sick or grieving or new at college or just a lonely kid at summer camp. What you may have not considered is that somebody actually invented the care package. The original ones date back 80 years to World War II, and the organization behind it is called the Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe, or CARE. The initial goal was providing life-saving aid to war survivors. 8 decades on, the group is still providing humanitarian aid wherever it's needed. And with us right now in Studio 3 is Michelle Nunn, the CEO of CARE. Michelle, welcome to the Curiosity Desk. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So I cannot imagine that I am alone in having never realized that what we call a care package was a specific thing, and it was invented. It was invented by the organization that you are the head of. Tell us about its origins.
Yeah, it's such a great, iconic story of American generosity that most people don't even know, even though, as you said, they've sent a care package.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they don't know that it harkens back to a couple of Americans who said, we're not going to stand on the sidelines and watch people face into starvation in post-World War II Europe. And literally within a few months, they figured out how to get 15,000 care packages, which, as you said, was an acronym.
Yeah.
And those care packages went from Philly to Le Havre, France. And that was the beginning of a movement that over the next 20 years enabled over 100 million care packages to be delivered. And now it results in an organization that continues to serve, last year, 60 million people in 100-plus countries. So
not bad.
A beautiful story of generosity and care.
So what did the original care packages look like? What was in them?
So the very original care packages were former Army rations, so that they didn't have any more use for, and they said, let's get these and let's send them over. And then within a few months, they turned into these sort of cardboard boxes, and there was all these great things that were in the original care packages. People still remember as a wonderful care package recipient who was a kid then. Her name is Renata. She was just with us actually a couple of months ago, and she said, I can still taste the chocolate from that original care package. And, you think about her, for instance, she was living in Germany. Here were her former enemies, people that she had been taught to be afraid of, who were literally giving her chocolate and really important food that was enabling her family to survive an incredibly difficult passage.
Unbelievable. So, obviously, the years following World War II in Europe in particular were, trying times to say the least, but didn't last forever. And yet your organization didn't stop the mission. So can you talk a little bit about what the evolution of this organization looked like and why, as Europe started to stand on its own 2 feet, you didn't just go like, all right, cool, mission accomplished, we're done.
Yeah. Well, within the first few years, actually, of CARE's existence, we started to look around. I wasn't around then, but
to be clear, everybody,
that old. But the CARE founders said, look, this is something that's needed in a lot of different places. So from the Middle East to India, we've been serving in places for over 70 years, and what we learned over those years was that we can and should and must help people when they're in a dire emergency with the basics. And that's often food.
Yeah.
That's often water. That's often shelter. But we also can and must help people to have the opportunity to live lives of dignity over the long term. And so that means that they need to be lifted up out of poverty, to be given that opportunity to really thrive and to ensure that their children can go to school and to make sure that they have health care and for women, for instance, to have economic opportunity. And so those are all the things that we've learned and that we now apply in our work going forward.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with Michelle Nunn, CEO of CARE, about the origins of the care package, state of humanitarian aid in her organization today. Well, let's get into the details a little bit about what you do today. I presume you are not simply just packing stuff up in boxes and shipping them to these places in the world that you're talking about. When I hear you talk about the way you've expanded the mission and the way you think about what you're doing and what the world needs right now, it sounds like more than just boxes with stuff in them.
That's right. I mean, we actually don't send things from America traditionally to other places around the world. We're actually building markets in local communities for the most part, as an example. But let me give you an example of what we are doing. We actually reincarnating the idea of that care package with what we call a emergency care package right now.
Interesting. So what's in that?
So let me tell you about that, because it was actually designed by one of our colleagues in India who was leading our humanitarian response. And he said, when people are displaced after a natural disaster, what we see is that they have to go this place to get a blanket and this place to get a tarp, and maybe they'll get a water filtration system. But all of these things, you can imagine, not easy to carry these things, etc. So we started working together with him, with the design center in India. We said, what if we put together a backpack that could actually be something that a woman could carry, actually with her baby on the front, if that was something that she needed to do. And it has 38 different interventions in it altogether. So it has everything from a tarp for shelter to a clean water filtration system to solar battery lamp, so that, for instance, kids can do their homework. They can also plug in their cell phone, their family, in order to be connected to the world. And so it can actually support a family for a month, a family of 4. And that's the kind of reinvention, I would say, of the care package. And these are locally procured supplies. And, we're bringing them everywhere from the Philippines to Nepal to, in Malawi.
Wow. I mean, did you say a family of how many for how long?
A family of 4 for a month.
Which is wild. But my understanding, the original care packages were sort of predicated on this idea, these Army rationing packages, which was 10 in 1 or 10 for 1, it was called, which is either 10 people for 1 day or 1 person for 10 days. And now you're talking about a family of 4 over a course of 40 days.
That's right. And, they'll need supplemental food and so forth. But now they have a cook stove to cook it, and they have a water filtration in order to be able to enable them to continue to survive. And what we're finding is they're actually using it because if you look at the Philippines, for instance, they've had over a dozen natural disasters that have hit some of these communities over and over again in the last year. And so they're using these care, sort of emergency packages to continue to equip themselves so they can take it for the next emergency.
Can you talk us through the logistics of how you pull this off a little bit more? I mean, as you're saying, you mentioned that you're in all of these places around the globe. You said, I think, a lot of this stuff is locally procured. So how do you stand up these, whatever it is, pieces of your organization in different parts of the globe? How do you just logistically get these items together, get them delivered to people on the ground? I mean, it sounds like a huge operation.
It is a big operation. And as I said, we work in over 100 different countries. 97% of our staff are from the places that they're serving. So we work in Afghanistan, we work in Gaza, we work in Haiti. Those are community members who are leading the response in the places that they serve. So that's the first thing, very locally based. The second thing is then very locally procured, because we want to be building markets where we know that those markets need additional support. And so we're putting together those care packages in places like Nepal, as an example. And then we are pre-packaging them, because one of the things that we know, and one of the things that we haven't always done over the last decades, is if we get to people, even before a disaster, which we now can better anticipate because of AI, then we have the capacity to significantly increase the impact of our support to them. So there's been studies that say, if we actually get cash, which is one of the most effective ways of supporting people in an emergency, in addition to these sort of physical things, if you get cash to people before an emergency happens, a few days before, knowing that it's coming, that it can actually be 3 to 7 times more impactful and effective and cost efficient.
When you say because of AI, I mean, AI is something that we cover on this show a lot. We're very interested in. How are you using or working with AI to help you do this?
Well, I mean, we now have better tools in order to predict weather patterns, right? And so that's helping everything from anticipatory disaster response to it's also helping us pinpoint where are our communities that need the most help. We're equipping our community health workers, frontline community health workers, to say, actually, you need to make, if you can only make these visits, and we have a limited number of community health workers, go to these households based upon the prenatal information that you're getting so that you can best serve the moms that are most vulnerable.
So finding efficiencies and how to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak.
Exactly. And another example is smallholder farmers around the world haven't always had access to, this is the in the next 24 hours, this is the time to plant seeds because, the rains are going to be coming at this point. So it really does have the impact of equipping people in a way that can be transformational.
You listen to the Curiosity Desk. We're talking with Michelle Nunn, CEO of CARE, about the origin of the CARE package. CARE, her organization, invented the CARE package 80 years ago. And we're talking also sort of about the state of humanitarian aid. And I want to stay on that for a second. Obviously, some time back now, huge cuts to U.S. aid, something that made a lot of headlines. I think, people kind of understood that it was a big change for what the government was investing money in. Your organization was impacted pretty heavily by that. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. What happened and where do things stand now following those cuts?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen not only in the U.S., but around the world, huge cuts to the humanitarian sector and humanitarian aid. And so we've sort of said, at a time when needs are going through the roof, the resources are falling through the floor. And that's a difficult state of affairs because that leaves literally hundreds of millions of people without the support and life-saving assistance they need. So CARE's adopting to this, and we're looking to find, new ways of cost-efficiently reaching people, collaborating in new ways. But there is a extraordinary amount of suffering in the world. We see that in the latest Middle East conflict as an example, over 1 million people in Lebanon where CARE is working every single day, women on the streets who literally have just given birth with their babies without capacity for access to health care, food, shelter. So that's the kind of delivery that we're doing, even with more limited resources.
You've mentioned the needs of women a few times. I know your organization has made a point that in particular right now, one of the focuses is on the health and safety and well-being of women and girls in particular around the world. Why is that so important?
Well, over our 80 years of operating, we've learned that when you stand with women and girls, that you have a disproportionate impact on their families and their communities.
So it's good business.
It's a good way of ensuring that you're lifting people up out of poverty. And so, as an example, when women and girls have the chance to make it through secondary school, their children are twice as likely to live past the age of 5. They're able to increase their income over the lifetime of their family by 20 to 30%. And, obviously, when women are succeeding, they're able to support their kids to go to school. They're able to ensure their health. And it's just, it's obvious that when half of the population is disempowered and kept out of marketplaces and the capacity to contribute, then you have poorer societies. So it's a way for us to, I would say, as you said, really, increase the bang for the buck of our investments to create change and to support people that need our help.
I wonder what you make just sort of more broadly. I mean, I think about, in addition to the USAID cuts, we hear a lot of talk about this idea of diplomacy or soft power. And your organization, I think it's interesting because there's the sort of philosophical conversation or the abstract conversation that happens around that. But then you look at an organization like the one you are running, and that is a concrete example of like soft U.S. power. And I think in addition to the U.S. aid cuts, I think we see more broadly over the last few years an administration that's moving away from that more generally. And certainly using, we're literally right now at war with Iran. We chose to use military instead of do diplomacy in that particular case. That's just one example. I mean, what do you make of the climate where the work that you do in a real concrete way seems to be caught up in a philosophical change in direction, as you point out, not just in the U.S., but in other places in the world too?
Yeah, we're concerned about that, obviously, and we think there actually is bipartisan support. If we walk the halls of Congress, there's Republicans and Democrats that all agree that actually our involvement and leadership in the world. And keep in mind that it's less than 1% of our budget. There's, I think, there's examples of the fact that people around the world, not just Americans, think that they are actually contributing 20 times more in their international aid budget. It's a tiny fraction of our overall budget, and yet it has a huge return. And it has a return in terms of health security, because we want to be dealing with pandemics where they start, not after they've spread. It has a return in terms of national security, because we want to make sure that conflicts and stability are enabled for, again, businesses to flourish, not only businesses in other communities, but international business. And we certainly know that it is the right thing to do. And America has a history very much in keeping with the care package itself, which is, I think, perfect embodiment of America's far-reaching investment post-World War II that included not only care packages, but the Marshall Plan. And the majority of our trading partners right now are countries that have at one point received American aid and assistance. So I think the argument for it is both the moral argument and also an investment in our own well-being and security as a nation.
Before I let you go, you mentioned the halls of Congress. I know you have run for Senate from your home state of Georgia. Your father Sam Nunn was a longtime U.S. Senator from Georgia. Recently had a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act that is going to have implications on how states draw their congressional districts. And I'm thinking about your state of Georgia in particular as I look at a map. It seems like all around Georgia, right? You have states, Louisiana, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina are sort of caught up in this redistricting thing that's happening. What do you make of what this means for your home state of Georgia looking over the next even months to years?
Well, I have mainly been turning my attention over the last 10 years to our international needs and also our needs here at home from a poverty perspective. So I'm out of the political business for the moment. But I will just say that I think that Americans are looking for the opportunity to have rationalized, civil, independent sort of commissions for what it looks like when we establish our districts so that every vote counts in a way that is equitable. And I think we want that in Georgia, and I think that's what citizens around the country want as well.
Real quick, what can people do if they're hearing you talk about this organization, CARE? Maybe they know about it a little bit. Maybe they don't know about it at all, and they hear you telling them about the work that you're doing, and they want to get involved. How can people get involved?
Yeah, well, I think one message that we have is ordinary Americans 80 years ago and today have the opportunity to make a big difference, not only in their own communities, but around the world. And by the way, we're doing emergency care package relief work right here in the U.S. as well. So you can go to care.org and you can learn more about the work. You can lift up your voices in the halls of Congress and write your congressional member and say that you want America to be a generous nation in the world. And you can make a contribution. You can ensure that your own care package is delivered to someone who will be seen and feel the love and hope of what it means to be supported at a time of great vulnerability.
I mean, sounds like an incredible organization. Sounds like a lot of work to be the CEO. Does anybody ever send you a care package?
I have been the recipient of many care packages, and I will thank my mom, who was the number one sender. And I would say that working at CARE, we get sort of care packages all the time in the sense that we get to see the transformational difference that it can make from people's lives, which is the biggest gift of all.
All right, we've been speaking with Michelle Nunn, CEO of CARE. Michelle, thank you so much for being with us here on the Curiosity Desk.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
All right, stay with us. Just ahead, we're celebrating revolutionary American musicians of the last 250 years. This week, what everyone misunderstands about Bob Dylan, the man who wrote so prophetically that the sun's not yellow, it's a chicken. This is the Curiosity Desk on GBH. Stay with us.
I'm Jared Bowen. Tune into The Culture Show for daily discourse on the arts and culture scene, and join us for what is a continuous conversation about the state of the arts with the most interesting thinkers, innovators, and creators in the region and beyond. From the poets to the painters to the power brokers who hold the purse strings. It's all here on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Newport Mansions, presenting 11 historic properties and landscapes, including 7 national historic landmarks, tracing America's architectural and social development from the colonial era through the Gilded Age. NewportMansions.org.
And the Boston Speaker Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, historian Doris Kearns-Goodwin, and financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin. BostonSpeakers.org.
You are listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Well, in our ongoing celebration of America 250, we like to sometimes train our gaze back on the many revolutions in American music and some of the most revolutionary figures across the genres. We're going to spend time now on a guy who rose from relative obscurity to the national spotlight last year after serving as the focus for the Timothée Chalamet film, A Complete Unknown. Yeah, that's a joke. Of course, we are talking about Bob Dylan, someone who remains totally enigmatic in spite of their ubiquity and massive place in American culture. Now, obviously, there's no shortage of folks out there who will tell you that Dylan is, of course, a revolutionary figure in American music. And my guest today wholeheartedly agrees, but he also says that Dylan is somebody that almost everybody gets totally wrong. And that definitely piques my curiosity. Our guest is music journalist Tim Reilly. Tim is the author of numerous books, the most relevant for our purposes being Hard Brain, a Dylan commentary. And you can check out his Substack at any time, The Reilly Rock Report. Tim Reilly, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Really excited for this conversation. All right, what did we get wrong about Bob Dylan?
Well, the first thing most people get wrong is there is this idea that for some reason Bob Dylan can't sing, or he never could sing, or he doesn't have a good voice.
I think that's think that you don't have to go far to find someone who would tell you that.
You know, everyone would say, oh, well, he's a good songwriter, but I don't really want to listen to him sing. And the problem is, you really need to give him a chance, and you really need to understand that most critics consider him one of our great singers. Like in terms of American singers, he's up there with anybody you want to name. Ray Charles,
okay, so make the case. Make the case, and what do you think it is that people are missing?
Okay, so I think most people mistake the gravelly voice as a weak instrument. And in vocal terms, you probably would not describe his voice, his instrument, as a strong, versatile instrument, but the way he uses that instrument. All right, so imagine the harmonica that only has like 3 valves. Well, he uses those 3 valves extremely creatively. So he takes a very gravelly and rough-sounding voice, which is not your typical pop voice. It's really a rock and roll voice. And he stretches it, and when he holds his vowels, he can bend his vowels into completely new shapes and colors and meanings. And it is an extraordinary vocal workout you get on any single Dylan song. And the measure of that is that we most often prefer hearing Dylan sing his own material, and we measure everybody else's version of a Dylan song against Dylan's own version of that song.
Yeah.
And that tells you that he's his own best interpreter.
So let's listen to a little bit of Dylan. I think Visions of Johanna, is that what you pick as an example of, let's listen and you're gonna talk a little bit about what he's doing with his voice. So here's a little bit of Visions of Johanna. This is from his 1966 album, Blonde on Blonde.
Inside the museum, infinity goes up on trial. Voices echo, this is what salvation must be like after a while.
Okay, so right there you have this great example. I mean, there is no other singer in the world who would take that line, infinity goes up on trial, and bend it just that way. And at first, it's extremely peculiar, and you think, where is he pointing this? And then you listen to it after 10, 20 times, and you think, oh my God, he's so inside the lyric that he's pushing it in ways nobody else could possibly push it, and that he is kind of forcing you to join him on his register with the song, and it's a very, very interesting journey he will take you on if you listen to it that way.
I'm always struck by, so there's this interview that Leonard Cohen, another great musician, gave in 1988 to Musician magazine, and in this he's talking about Dylan. Here's his quote. He says, "There's no concession to the fact that Dylan might be a more sophisticated singer than Whitney Houston, that he's probably the most sophisticated singer we've had in a generation. Nobody is identifying popular songs like a Matisse or a Picasso. Dylan's Picasso.
Well, no, exactly. That's exactly right. Okay, so here's a thought exercise. Can you imagine Whitney Houston singing any Dylan song?
I mean, I think there are some people out there who would say they could imagine her singing every Bob Dylan song, and it's going to sound beautiful, and it's going to sound pristine, it's going to sound powerful.
Not my taste. Not my taste. And, I really just don't want to hear a lot of melismas in Dylan songs. Now, melismas are when you hold a vowel and you stretch it out over several notes, right?
Yeah.
And Whitney Houston does that constantly. In fact, my beef with Whitney Houston, she's a great singer, but it's too many melismas. It's just all melisma too much of the time. It's all peaks and no valleys. And I would really hesitate before I would think, so what would I think? What Dylan song should she sing, and could she pull it off? I'm not sure. Now, that's a minority opinion. I agree, yeah.
But that's okay. This is a place where it's safe to have a minority opinion,
Okay.
in part why we brought you on here. We're talking with Tim Reilly. He's an Emerson College professor, music writer, author of several books, including Hard Rain, a Dylan commentary. We're talking about Bob Dylan and what people get wrong about him as part of our America 250 coverage. Dylan as a revolutionary American musician. All right, point number 2. What do you got? What else do we get wrong about him?
Okay, so the big moment early in Dylan's career that the movie is based on is that he goes electric to the Newport Folk Festival in the summer of 1965. And what most people get wrong about that is that he's leaving folk music and turning into a rock and roll musician. And the controversy was the folkies really hated that because they thought, oh, we've got our great young songwriter here, and he's going to be a folkie the rest of his life, and he's going to carry that Woody Guthrie flag. What they didn't understand, and what makes a lot more sense in retrospect, is that he was moving into rock and roll to be more subversive and more revolutionary.
Oh.
He knew he would reach a larger audience and could actually be more disruptive with non-topical material than he ever could be with the folky script of here's a topical song about X, and here's how we feel about it, and here's the leftist position on it. He knew that Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again was going to be a much more disruptive and subversive and incendiary song.
It's an interesting take. I mean, again, I think to your point, the narrative is often, for folks who, are interested in Dylan, you often hear right around 64, 65, you point out that, My Back Pages or Restless Farewell, these are songs that are him saying, goodbye protest movement, goodbye protest songs, I am going to go become something else.
Yeah, and it was very deliberate, and at the time he was accused of being a sellout, and now we think of it very, very differently because he understood rock and roll much better than a lot of us did at the time, and he had new arrows for the style where he was taking us in new directions, and that it almost makes a little too much sense in retrospect. It's almost like, wait a second, he was a folkie first? Like, it almost doesn't make any sense. When you listen to Freewheelin' Bob Dylan now, which is his second album, all original material, and you hear him sing and you hear him play that harmonica, the harmonica now, it sounds like a lead guitar. It sounds like, oh, this is a rock and roll guy. Like, it just doesn't, the folk thing is almost like, yeah, he's, he can make sense of folk, but the folk, he's a great singer-songwriter before he's a folk singer or before he's a rock singer or anything else.
All right, let's hear a little more Bob Dylan. So this is, again, from Blonde on Blonde, and a single that came out before, and then it's on the album, I think. Rainy Day Women, number 12 and 35, a post-protest era Bob Dylan song that I suppose you claim is also a protest song. Let's hear a little, and then Tim's going to talk about it. Everybody knows this one?
Yeah.
Stone you and say that it's the end. Then they'll stone you and then they'll come back again. They'll stone you when you're riding in your car. They'll stone you when you're playing your guitar. Yes, but I would not feel so all alone. Everybody must get stoned.
All right, so there you have, right? There you have. That's the lead track of Blonde on Blonde, his first double album. It's one of rock and roll's earliest double albums. It's a tour de force. And that
sort of a blurry Bob Dylan close up on the cover.
Blurry Bob Dylan cover, and that is the lead track. So that is how he is introducing us to this incredible new slate of songs that is completely all over the map. I mean, I never get tired of listening to Blonde on Blonde. And that session is almost as fun to imagine, like what fun they were having in that session.
Yeah.
And at the time, it's hard to describe like how completely rebellious that was. Like we're going to open our doors to public culture, to our marijuana party. Like in 1966, that just wasn't done. You just didn't do that. And here's Dylan just kind of doing it and saying, deal with it.
Yeah.
And it remained really subversive for a long, long time. I mean, the legalization of marijuana was unimaginable when that was released. It was unimaginable.
Yeah.
And he was simply saying, what's the big deal here, right? And it still works on many different levels. It's, whatever's illegal right now that everyone knows should be legal, like that song still works.
Yeah. All right, you're listening to The Curiosity Desk. We're talking with music journalist Tim Reilly about the revolutionary American songwriter and musician Bob Dylan. Okay, point number 3. What else do we get wrong or sort of think wrongly about Bob Dylan?
Well, so he's gone through a lot of different phases, and so I think the simplistic take on Bob Dylan, he's one of the great American originals. He is, but he's also kind of, especially for critics, he's exasperating because he's so inconsistent. So he goes through many long periods where he releases weak records. And one of the barometers of greatness now is that rock and roll has stretched into 7 decades, right? And he's still out there performing in his 80s.
Yeah.
So, our expectations about how you sustain a rock and roll career have really changed. It's kind of like how many bad records can you put out and still be great?
Right.
And Dylan is one of the key barometers of that because he goes through these long stretches where it's just really, some of the stuff's just really hard to listen to. It's very weak.
It's interesting. I mean, I find, I feel like there are on polar ends of this, but Bob Dylan, it's sort of like he puts a lot of what he does out into the world and has increasingly over time. I mean, you have the basement tapes and things like this where it's just like, there's so much material out there, and it's a little bit like there's one philosophy, I think, which is, all right, we're just going to sort of show you all of this. I'm going to kind of show you everything. I'm going to let you comb through the catalog and find what you think is important in this. But I, as an artist, am going to just wear it all on my sleeve and show you everything. Versus, on the other side, something like the Beatles, where it's sort of a very carefully managed, very carefully constructed, very careful about anything that goes out into the world, and they feel like they're very opposite. But you sort of say either can be a great way forward, and one is not necessarily right or wrong.
I do think that, and it's a very interesting observation. The Beatles are very heavily curated before they release their product, and Dylan is much less curated, and he often does things like he writes a great song like Blind Willie McTell, and then he leaves it off the album.
Yeah.
I think it's Infidels.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
No, it was an Infidels outtake.
I mean, that is clearly one of his great, great songs, and that he left it off. I mean, it's just kind of inexplicable. Like, who would do that? He's not a good curator of his own material.
We've got a little of Blind Willie McTell. Let's hear a little of that cut.
It's a very interesting note for Bob Dylan to strike. It's a note of humility. It's a note of how he feels history looms so large over his writing and his career, and he'll never be able to live up to some of the heights that his heroes reached.
He does something in this song which is not uncommon for Bob Dylan, and I would love to get your take on this, but especially as we talk about what we understand a great musician or artist or writer to be, and I think it's a little bit what Leonard Cohen was trying to get at when he's talking about Bob Dylan's singing voice, and that is, I hear this song, the first thing I think is, well, that's St. James Infirmary,
Yeah.
right? That's the melody of St. James Infirmary.
Right.
And there's a lot of Bob Dylan work where he's taking the melody from something else and reworking it or putting his spin on it. And on the one hand, I think some people look at something like that and they go, well, like, what kind of a songwriter can this guy be? He can't even come up with an original melody. Versus, again, to make a Beatles comparison, somebody like a Paul McCartney who's being very inventive with his melodies, or somebody like a Brian Wilson who's being, to a certain extent, at least later, and is like very inventive with melodies. But with Bob Dylan, it seems this part of this is the point that he's saying there is this whole great history of American music. And part of the point is, like a painter might, he's riffing on it, or like a filmmaker might, where they're making references, and that reference is key to understanding part of the song.
That's exactly the way that we need to hear it. And so context becomes all important. So Woody Guthrie was sort of he's the role model, right? And Woody Guthrie was famous for borrowing someone else's melody and putting new lyrics to it. I mean, that was the tradition. That was how these folk singers, this is long before they started making recordings, right? In the era before recordings, a melody was like a pair of clothes that you put on, like a pair of jeans you'd wear for a few days, right? And anybody could wear them and walk around in them. That was the idea. That was the whole point, okay? So it wasn't thought of as stealing at all if Woody Guthrie did something like that. The other part of the surrounding context is he's busy spewing a ton of original stuff all around this. So this is not the only thing he's doing, right? This is part of a larger story that he's telling.
It's a move that he has, but it's not the only one.
It's a move that he has, and it fits just perfectly. Now, there are some really interesting accusations of plagiarism in the Dylan catalog, and that are worth hunting down and tracking because they do give one pause. But I would say the larger tradition is really much more like, the way Mahler quotes Beethoven in his Second Symphony. I mean, you have to sort of say, hey, this is somebody tipping his hat.
All right, you're listening to The Curiosities. We're talking with music journalist Tim Reilly about the revolutionary American songwriter and musician Bob Dylan. There's two things I want to get to before we let you go, and one is the Nobel Prize, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we also have one last cut, which you pointed out for us, and I'd love for you to make some points around this. So what we're going to hear here is a song which was most notably done by Frank Sinatra. This is the song I Could Have Told You. This is a Frank Sinatra song. It was written in the early 50s. It's kind of a deep cut for Sinatra. But Bob Dylan covered this on a record that he did of Sinatra music. And what we're going to hear here is the beginning of this. We're going to hear Frank, and then we're going to hear Bob doing the same song a couple seconds in. So let's have...
All right,
a great
so
track.
There's a lot to say there.
I am surprised how much I like Dylan doing that song, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I think it's very surprising. It was very surprising to me. I'm one of these critics who I keep giving up on Dylan, and he keeps proving me wrong. Like, you can't give up on this guy. This is from an album called Triplicate, where he went into the studio and did these tracks live with a band, and it's all these Sinatra songs. And it's fascinating because, again, you're taking this gravelly rock and roll voice and you're having it do this old-style Tin Pan Alley music, which is the tradition that rock and roll rebelled against, okay?
Yeah.
We reject Tin Pan Alley. We reject Frank Sinatra. He's actually an enemy of young rock and roll, and he's actually doing it rock and roll justice. In other words, he's giving it a new context, a new frame, and he's convincing you that, oh, no, these are not only are these great songs, but they're great songs in a rock and roll sense, in that a rock and roll singer can fully inhabit and extend these songs into new directions that the style allows for in ways that Tin Pan Alley would never. So again, flip the script, right? Can you imagine Frank Sinatra singing a Dylan song? And that just makes no sense. But Dylan making sense of the Sinatra tradition, actually, it makes a whole different kind of sense. It's a perfect flip. And it actually shows you how big rock and roll is and how all the early pretensions of rock and roll, they're true in ways that we're still discovering.
Really interesting stuff. All right, before I let you go, let's talk about the Nobel Prize, because I think that was, as a man who has a life full of controversies, Bob Dylan, I feel like there was a lot of controversy around him getting a Nobel Prize for literature. What do you make of it?
Well, look, early literature, I mean, the earliest forms of literature in the Western tradition, which is only one of many world traditions, let's remember. But, Homer was sung. Homer is song, right? Homer was a blind guy, and he was working in that Woody Guthrie tradition of the oral tradition. It was oral. It was passed along orally for hundreds of years before it got written down. Once it got written down, it was edited and condensed and compressed in ways that we still, that still are mysterious to us. But it's meant to be sung around campfires. It's meant to be passed along from person to person by ear. Writing it down and studying it as literature came later. So of course Bob Dylan is Nobel Prize for Literature. That makes perfect sense.
I like that. That's a bit of a, if not a hot take, it's at least a warm take, and it's interesting.
It just doesn't make any other kind of sense to me. And the people who are upset about it, they're wrong.
Yeah, you're again with Leonard Cohen on this, who said, I think he said him getting the Nobel Prize is like pinning a medal on Mount Everest. He's also like, of course.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, and you reflect on it and you think, yeah, it took him long enough. Right? He was way out ahead of us for a long time. Finally, the Nobel Committee catches up with culture and with the artist, with Bob Dylan. Yeah.
All right. We've been speaking with music writer and Emerson College professor Tim Reilly. He's the author of several books, including Hard Rain, a Dylan commentary. You can also check out his Substack, The Reilly Rock Report. Tim, thanks so much for being with us.
This was a blast. Thanks a lot.
All right, up next, did you know weekend there was an Oddities and Curiosities Expo here in Boston? I mean, come on, how are we not going to touch on that? We get a full report from one GBHer who was on the scene next. This is the Curiosity Desk. Don't go anywhere.
While every veteran's path to PTSD treatment looks different, therapy tends to be the first step to healing. And mindfulness therapy, the act of turning normal activities into meditation, is gaining steam.
My therapist said, all right, here's a barbecue potato chip. I want you to put this on your tongue, and I want you to think about how the salts and the sugars separate.
I'm Scott Detrow. More on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And MIT Sloan Executive Education, helping professionals stay competitive with 2 to 3 day courses on AI essentials, strategic leadership, and more. Details at executive.mit.edu.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Well, here at the Curiosity Desk, we are lovers of all things strange, weird, and curious. Well, as it turns out, we're not alone. Thousands of people visited the Heinz Convention Center in Boston over the weekend for their second annual Oddities and Curiosities Expo. The event visits dozens of cities around the country. It features vendors, artists, and of course a lot of oddities that are there to be seen and sometimes purchased. GBH's own Diego Lopez was at the expo, and he joins us now to talk about some of the highlights. Diego, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thanks so much for having me.
So what the heck is this thing?
So this is a pretty big event. Like you said, it's at Heinz Convention Center. It's filled to the brim of mostly vendors selling all kinds of things that are related to different dark arts, different horror. There's a lot of taxidermy, animal skulls.
A lot of taxidermy.
A lot of taxidermy.
Really?
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, this really set the tone for me when I arrived. One of the first things I saw was a woman walking around with a giant stuffed possum holding a Pabst Blue Ribbon in its little hands. And, things just kind of escalated from there. You know, you kind of every little corner that you turn, you never knew what you were going to see.
That's pretty cool. So take us through some of the highlights. I mean, you just mentioned, I don't know if you can beat the first thing that you saw, but paint a picture a little bit more for us. Who's there? Who's running this thing? How does it work?
Yeah, so this originally started back in 2017. There was a woman named Michelle Nunn who started this with her husband, and she explained to me a little bit about where the idea for this came from.
I've always been weird. Purple hair, colored, tattoos, stuff like that. So it's this all started for my own love of collecting weird things over the years. And I could have never dreamed that it would blow up into this. And, now we have 45 cities across 3 countries and, I'm just slowly taking over the world. But it all started from my own personal love.
Yeah, and so that love of the weird, as you said, spread to thousands of people who were all here to kind of get in on some of that. And people were there for all sorts of reasons. Some people told me, like, well, I felt weird growing up, so these are my people. This is where I felt comfortable. Some were like, well, I like to support artists in this age of AI, so I wanted to, get some original art. And then there were people who wanted to just look for something specific. Like, there's one attendee I spoke with, Molly Whitmore. She told me what she was looking for when she came.
The most interesting thing I think I was looking for was some wet specimens, like snakes in jars with liquid and formaldehyde or whatever it is. But they're pretty interesting to look at, especially when they're uplit from the shelf. Love that.
Did you call it wet specimen?
Yeah.
Is that her term or is that a term?
That's a good...
were there a bunch of signs that were like, get your wet specimen here?
I mean, the closest thing I saw to what she described is there was one little shop that had like snakes and tarantulas and, little jars of formaldehyde. So I guess they are wet if you were to open them.
I mean, that's accurate.
And then there were dry specimens too, like I saw a little squirrel taxidermy holding an electric guitar and... that was just par for the course for this type of thing.
Do you feel like, did you have a sense going in, like, for example, you point out a lot of taxidermy, and it sounds like a lot of like kind of fun with taxidermy, like, a possum with a Pabst Blue Ribbon in his hand, or, a squirrel with a guitar. Did you go in understanding that there is a world of taxidermy that is this diverse and large, or were you like, what?
No, I was a little bit surprised by how big of a presence that had there, but really it was very eclectic. I mean, there was like human teeth art and stuff like that, and like kind of grotesque pottery and like, but there was kind of something for everybody there, and I think that's kind of why these things are so exciting and why they attract so many people is that like, if you really never know what you're going to see there. And so I think that's kind of what added to the interest. And then of course, there's so much art too. That's just
what kind of art?
A lot of it was horror themed, kind of, like horror characters or kind of like angels, but not in the sort of, Catholic
happy,
sense.
nice
yeah,
sense,
exactly. More like the,
dark
what
angels.
they say, the biblically accurate, angel sense, and so that was really cool too, because there was a lot of, it's very local. Like it kind of reminded me of like a lot of stuff you'd see too at like a Salem shop, very witchy, very occulty, that sort of thing.
And were there, what were some of the more like kind of witchy, like that strain, the witchy, the occulty, like what were the kind of vendors there that were selling more of that kind of on the nose Salem stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, you could obviously get your tarot cards. They sold a lot of like, this one I didn't totally understand, but like minerals and little dolls and stuff like that you're supposed to use in certain rituals. Little candles and statuettes and oils. That was like a really big one. I was talking to one vendor and they said that was like one of their more popular things was that people would use all these like herbal oils and stuff like that. And so that was all like all had like a massive presence.
We're talking with Diego Lopez from GBH about the Oddities and Curiosities Expo. You've kind of carved out this unofficial kind of nerd event beat, which is pretty cool for GBH. I wonder if you could talk put this in the context of that. You've done some reporting in the last few weeks on a couple of these sorts of expos, not exactly the Curiosities and Oddities Expo, but these kind of niche community expos. What are some of the ones that you've been covering?
Well, I've done the PAX East, which was, video games. I did Fan Expo last year, which was really quite broad in entertainment. I did a historical weapons at the Worcester Art Museum.
Really?
Yeah, when
neat.
that opened up, which was really fun too. But, it's kind of interesting because, people keep telling me like, oh, you do all these niche things. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, that these things are so niche.
Say more about that.
So I was talking to Mark Hurst of Morning Edition the other day, and I was telling him what is the highest grossing media project of all time?
It's probably some video. It's got to be a video game.
Yeah, it's Grand Theft Auto 5, which came out in 2013. So, that's not really that niche, right?
Right.
It's just that in
That's
public
a
radio...
multi-billion-dollar industry.
It's $8 billion. Yeah, it's just that in public radio, we associate, it with, more traditionally considered high art type of things, you know, like Broadway and stuff like that. But I was reading about this the other day, and I thought this was really interesting. Like, take like Phantom of the Opera and Sweeney Todd, right? By like Andrew Lloyd Webber and Sondheim. Like, those are really popular Broadway shows, but how did they get started? They were like newspaper serials and penny dreadfuls in like the 1800s and early 1900s. So these things that are considered like niche horror, you know, kind of for the masses, end up becoming high art later on.
Interesting. So what do you have? What do you have coming down the pike? Are you gonna stay on some of this stuff through the summer?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I mean, in August they have the Salem Witchcraft Festival, so I'm really hoping to get into that, and that'll be kind of more of some of what I've seen here, and hopefully a little bit, you know, branched out too. I'm very curious in this like occulty stuff. I think it's really fun. Not that I necessarily believe in it, but
what is it that captures your imagination about it? You know,
I think that like, you know, horror, creepy, macabre stuff is like it's kind of an interesting reflection of our own, you know, fears in a way, right? Like when Frankenstein came out and Mary Shelley wrote that in the early 1800s. That was when, you know, science was advancing really quickly and the world was changing. And so it reflects that fear, you know, and we had like Halloween and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies in the 70s at a time where, you know, cults and serial killers were kind of at the top of people's mind because there was just so much news coverage of it. So it's an interesting reflection of kind of our own society in a sense.
Really quick, Diego, before I let you go, I understand you maybe purchased or brought something for our little chest of curiosities from your travels to the Curiosities Expo. What do you got for us there?
All right, so here, I'll unwrap it for you right now. So like I mentioned, one of the witchy, you know, occult stores, they were selling candles. So I got you the spellcasting candle.
Okay.
It's a red skull.
Nice.
Quite large, actually. And they said this stands for, the red is like lust and passion and stuff like that. So I don't know what you want to do with that. But
nothing says lust and passion like the Curiosity Desk on GBH.
I would have gotten you the squirrel, but, you know, it's kind of expensive. So.
We've been speaking with GBH's Diego Lopez. Diego, thanks for being with us on the Curiosity Desk.
Thanks so much for having me.
That just about does it for us, by the way. Tune in for the Culture Show, which is coming right after us. Jared's talking with actress Claire Foy, that would be Queen Elizabeth II for fans of The Crown, on her new film, H is for Hawk. As for us, the Curiosity Desk is produced by Aidan Connolly, Rachel Armani, Olivia Corcio, Hannah Lawson, Nicole Garcia, Patty Daniels, and Jamie Bologna are our steady hands. Our engineer, John the Claw Parker. Special thanks, too, to Andrew Massawa. We will be right back here in 23 short hours on GBH 89.7 and streaming on YouTube. If you can't wait that long, check out the podcast version of our show. You can get that wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, I am Edgar B. Herwick III. And you, stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds. New properties are added often. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. When the offbeat country music-loving detective Mike Shepard